Story 1. Kicked my controlling ex-fiancé out. Now, when his dad disowned him and he's homeless, he's begging me to take him back. My 28F fiancé, 29M, wants me to put his family before mine, even at the expense of my family's health. Throwaway as my work friends are on my main and they don't know this is going on. Also, obligatory that this is on mobile, so spelling and grammar will be poo. This is a long one, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible. I, 28F, got engaged to my partner of 7 years, R, 29M, in May. Both sides of our family were really happy about this, and we had a big family meal 2 weeks after getting engaged. His brother lives 250 miles away and couldn't get here for that meal, so we decided to have a meal just for his family in late June when his brother would be back for the weekend. This weekend was arranged long before we got engaged, so he wasn't back just for the meal. Earlier this year, my sister, K, 32F, got a serious eye infection that very quickly turned into an ulcer, which scarred her cornea and left it at a high risk of a perforation. She needed a corneal graft, but her surgeon was away for 4 weeks, so she was going to have to wait until he got back to have it. However, her eye didn't hold, and it perforated the day I was supposed to be going to the family meal with R's brother. K's wife was at work and had her phone turned off, and our mom was away with our stepdad. So when K called me to let me know what was happening, I knew she would be at the hospital on her own. I immediately talked to my boss, and he let me go early so K wasn't on her own. I texted R to let him know what was going on, and he texted me back to send K his love and to remind me about the meal that night. I ignored the comment about the meal, as it was the last thing on my mind. Once I got to the hospital, I was taken back into a room where K was, to be greeted by 3 doctors and 2 nurses rushing around trying to help K. I was then informed that she needed to have an emergency operation to have her eye glued, or else she would lose it. The problem was that they didn't have a surgeon at that hospital that could do it, and she needed to go to another hospital an hour and a half away. They asked if she would need transportation or if I could take her. I said I would take her. Once we got to the other hospital, we were told that she would be having the operation at 5:30 p.m. I knew then that I wouldn't make the dinner and texted R to let him know. He flipped out and basically told me to leave K at the hospital and have her wife pick her up after the op was done. At this point, I still hadn't been able to get a hold of K's wife. I told him it wasn't going to happen and that he was out of order to even ask me to do that. I then texted his mom and told her what was going on. She was really supportive and told me to stay with K and let her know how the op goes. A dinner can be rescheduled. K's health can't. I also spoke with his brother, who was equally as understanding. I stayed with K. Her operation was a success, and I got her back home about 9 p.m. Her wife had ordered some Chinese and offered me some, which I happily accepted, as I hadn't eaten since lunch. R said I didn't get home till about 11 p.m., and I was already asleep. He was very short with me for days after, and we ended up having a huge fight where he told me that I should have put his brother and family before K. He said he was embarrassed going to the meal without me. I responded that I was embarrassed he thought I would put a meal before my sister's health. This led to another week of awkwardness between us before we finally sat down and sorted it out, or so I thought. 8 weeks ago, K got her graft and so far, everything is going really well with it. On Saturday, his brother was here, so we went out for dinner with his family. His family were all asking about how K was doing, and I showed them a picture of the stitches in her eye. I thought that everything had gone really well until we got home, and he got really angry, saying that I shouldn't have brought up K's health issues and I shouldn't have shown them the picture. I argued that they'd asked about her and asked to see the picture. It ended with him telling me that I needed to put him and his family before K or else we weren't going to work. His family will come before mine once we are married, so I should get used to it. I went upstairs and packed a bag. I'm now at my mom's house, and he's been bombarding me with texts and calls since I left. I do love him, but I will never put his family above my own family's health. I feel like he's expecting me to spend every holiday with his family and put their wants above my family's needs, which won't happen. I'm very close to my sister and my mom. That's not going to change. So, I don't really know how to move forward or if I even want to. Has anyone experienced anything like this before? So, how did you deal with it? Update 1. TLDR. For those that just want a quick update, I left him, and he's out of my house. His mom is seriously pissed at him, and his brother has gone no contact with him for the foreseeable future. For those that want a longer version, once I decided to end things with him, I knew that the main issue would be getting him out of my house. I own the house outright. My grandma died 5 years ago and left her house to my mom, who sold it and split the money between me and my sister. I then bought my house with that money about a year after she died. I got in touch with my stepdad's friend, who was a landlord, the day after I wrote my original post, who then put me in touch with his solicitor. He didn't have time to see me in person that day, but we did have a phone call where he gave me my options. In the UK, we have something called a Section 8 notice. This is a 14-day eviction notice, and the solicitor said this would be the quickest way to get him out. However, he could try and contest it if he wanted to, which would lead to court dates and could take months. I asked him to draw up the notice and date it for Friday, the next day. I'd already made the decision to end things with him after work on Friday, so that he could have the weekend to sort through his emotions before work on Monday. On Friday morning, I texted R and asked him to meet with me at our local pub after work. He quickly agreed. Not only is the pub a public space, but my stepdad and a few of his work friends go in there every Friday after work for a few pints. So I knew he would be there to step in if I needed him. Thank you for suggesting this, Redditors. I also picked up the eviction notice on my lunch break, so I was ready to give it to him. Cost £250, but was worth it. When I got to the pub, I was already there, and my stepdad was stood at the bar with his workmates. I sat down with R and got straight to the point. I told him that it was over. I couldn't be with someone who didn't give me any support when I was going through one of the scariest moments of my life and expected me to drop my family for his. It didn't matter what excuses he could come up with. I wasn't interested. I'd made up my mind and we were done. He stared at me in shock for what felt like an hour but was probably only a minute or so. He then started saying I couldn't be serious. We'd been together for 7 years, and I was throwing it all away. I could never find another guy like him. I responded to the last comment with, I don't want a guy like you. That's why I'm ending it. I need someone who will support me when times get tough, not get annoyed that the world isn't bowing down to what he wants. I then handed him an envelope with the eviction notice in and my engagement ring. I told him I was giving him a few weeks to find a place and be out of my house. Then I stood up and walked over to my stepdad, who had bought me a much-needed drink, and stayed with him until my ex left, still looking in shock. I knew he wouldn't approach me whilst I was with my stepdad, as he has always been a little scared of him. This is obviously a very condensed version of what happened. Once I got back to my mom's house, I had a single text from him saying he wasn't moving out and was going to contest the eviction until I'd come to my senses and got back with him. We are not over, was how he ended the text. I just turned my phone off and decided to deal with the legal side of things on Monday. There was nothing else I could do. Saturday morning, I woke up and turned my phone back on and had another text from him saying that he would move out if I paid him £10,000. As that's what he paid towards bills whilst he had lived at the house. He paid for half the electric, gas, Wi-Fi, and Sky package. Note, the Sky package is only as expensive as it is because he has to have every sports channel known to man, so his half literally just paid for the sports channels. I'd already asked the solicitor about this, though, and he'd assured me that I didn't owe him any money, as he hadn't contributed to a mortgage or any renovations of the house. It was just general expenses. He also knew that I don't have £10,000 just lying around. Let's say I was irritated by this and decided to ring his mom to see if she could talk some sense into him. I'll call his mom S to make it easier. She was appalled by what I told her and said she would speak to him. She called me back about an hour later and asked me to meet her at the house. I was on an away day to watch his football team play and wouldn't be back till about 10 p.m., so I knew he wasn't there. I met her at the house with K, and S said that R's brother was on his way back home, and they would have her out by the following afternoon. She hadn't even spoken to R, just his brother, but she promised he would be out. S then asked me to walk her through the house, showing her exactly what was his and what wasn't so he didn't take anything that didn't belong to him. The next morning, I got a text from R calling me all the names under the sun for getting his mom and brother involved. I blocked him. A couple of hours later, S texted me to let me know he was out and staying with her. I thanked her, and she told me that she would like to stay in contact, and I happily agreed to this. I went back to my house after work on Monday, changed the alarm code, and my stepdad changed all the locks for me. My stepdad is also arranging for a friend of his to install cameras around the outside of the house. This will be done over the weekend. Again, S rang me on Tuesday, asking if we could meet up as she had some things she wanted me to know. So we met for lunch that day. It was at this time that she told me her ex was a controlling asshole who was incredibly selfish, and the selfishness was what she had seen in R for so long. That's why she had commented on him being like his father, but she had hoped it was the extent of R's attitude, and he hadn't picked up his dad's controlling behavior, which, to be fair, he hadn't up until this whole episode. She had left R's dad after he had punched R's brother in the face when he was 14 and R was 10. He had never laid a hand on her or their sons before, but one time was enough and she left with the boys. To her knowledge, her ex had never reached out to speak to R or his brother, and they hadn't spoken to their father in years. I didn't know any of this. All I had been told was that their dad wasn't in the picture and hadn't been for a long time. But S had thought I knew, and that's why she hadn't told me before. However, she had found out on Sunday night that R was back in contact with his father and had been for the past year. His dad had been putting lots of thoughts into R's head about how he is the man of the house, and his family is all that matters. This had fed into R's selfish tendencies, and it amplified them tenfold. S said that she had told him to find somewhere else to stay ASAP, but she couldn't even look him in the face. Then R and his brother had a huge argument that ended with his brother telling him that as long as R is in touch with their dad, then he will have zero contact with him, even going so far as to tell him to spend Christmas with their dad because S is going to his house and R isn't welcome. When S took R's brother's side in all this, R flew into a rage and said he would move in with his dad. He then left the house but came back a couple of hours later looking like he had been crying. Turns out that his dad doesn't want him living with him and basically said he could be on the streets for all he cares. He's not putting a roof over a grown man's head. S thinks that R is now starting to realize everything he has lost due to him listening to his dad and has seen his dad's true colors. S is incredibly disappointed in him, but he's her son, so she is trying to be there for him as best as she can. However, she still wants him out as she doesn't trust him anymore. His brother still won't have anything to do with him. She has also told him to stay the hell away from me as I don't need to be brought into this, and he has promised her that he will. Only time will tell if that's true, but I do have him blocked on everything, and if he turns up to the house, I will just call the police to get rid of him. The more S told me about what had been going on behind my back, the more resolute I have become about wanting nothing to do with him. I never want to see him again if I can help it. So, all in all, R's life is a shambles, but as long as he stays away from me, then I don't care. I've been spending a lot of time with my sister and her wife as well as my mom and stepdad, which has been great. I've never really been close to my stepdad, but this has brought us a lot closer together, which has been one huge positive out of all this. I'm not exactly happy right now, but I'll get there. There's still a lot of feelings that I need to unpack, and it will take time to move on from this whole situation. I don't think I will be dating for a while. I need to really get over all this and don't want to dump this on anyone else right now. For all those asking how Kay is doing, she's doing great. Had a hospital appointment on Monday, and her consultant said her eye is healing. In his words, marvelously. So that's a relief. Thank you to everyone that reached out to me. I hope there won't be any need to update this again, so this should be my final update. Update 2. For telling my ex that it's not my fault that he's homeless. So, I, 28F, posted on relationship advice before about my now ex, 29M. The post and update is in my profile, but basically my ex-fiancé wanted me to put his family before mine, even at the cost of my sister's health. I ended up breaking up with him over it, and he was forced to move in with his mom, who then found out that he had been in touch with his abusive dad, who was twisting his view on how a relationship should work. Last I heard was that his mom was kicking him out, as she would not have anyone in her house that was in contact with her ex, and that he had tried to go live with his dad, but his dad had refused. I was completely in C with him, so his mom was the one that had told me this. I'll call my ex R and ex's mom S to make things easier. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, But yesterday he showed up at my house. I had the chain on my door, so I opened it with that still attached. No way would I let him in. He basically told me that he had nowhere to live. His mom isn't speaking to him, and his dad won't put a roof over a grown man's head. His words, not mine. He asked if I would take him back or at least let him live with me. No way in hell would I get back with him, and getting him out the first time only went easy because his mom stepped in to help. He had threatened to take me to court, knowing that if he did, it could take months to get him out, and then said he would only move if I gave him 10,000 pounds. I contacted his mom, who was furious about that, and she turned up with his brother and forced him out. I told him that there was zero possibility of him ever living with me again and that we were 100% over. He started shouting at me and calling me all sorts of names, so I threatened to call the police if he didn't leave and shut the door. I have cameras all over my house, so I caught everything he did and said on camera and have saved it to a USB just in case. He then went crying to all our mutual friends, and it managed to get back to his mom. She called me and asked what happened. I told her, and she then informed me that she had put her house up for sale and was moving 300 miles away to be nearer her other son. Her and R had a huge argument about this, and she finally kicked him out. Since then, he's been couch surfing, but with Christmas coming up, his friends aren't really happy with having him on their couches when they have kids and are meant to be enjoying the festive season. He's been kicked out of 3 friends' houses in 10 days. She told me I was right to refuse him, but I've since had other friends say that they feel sorry for him and that I can just let him stay in my spare room until he's back on his feet. I then asked them to put him up, but they said they would, but don't have room, and if they had a spare room like me, then they would let him stay. My family and his are on my side, but I'm starting to doubt myself with what a couple of my friends have said. So, Reddit, AITA? Edit. Just a quick edit as I'm going to bed. I've just spoken with the wife of one of R's friends, and she's asked to meet me on my lunch break tomorrow. Apparently, R stayed with them for 2 nights before she kicked him out, and there's more going on than what I know of. She's going to tell me the full story tomorrow, but told me that I shouldn't let him anywhere near me and that he's staying in a B&B, so he does at least have a roof over his head right now. I'll try and update after I've spoken to her. Update 3. So, I posted yesterday about my ex turning up at my house wanting for me to let him move back in with me. I said no, but a couple of friends thought I should let him in. That messed with my head. R is my ex. A few people told me to change my lock, etc. I did that and changed my alarm code, as well as my stepdad got his friend to put up 4 cameras around my house. I'm also going to start shutting the gate so that no one can walk up to the house without ringing the bell there first. I put in an edit that I was going to be meeting with one of R's friends' wives for lunch today, and I have to say that it was informative for sure. I'll call her N, 30F, and her husband Z, 29M. So, I went to meet her on my lunch break at a cafe near my work. It's a place that a lot of my coworkers go to, and I know the staff there as well. A few Redditors thought that she might bring R with her, so I wanted it to be somewhere I feel comfortable and have backup if needed. Turns out that I didn't need to bother about that. When I got to the cafe, N was there on her own. I grabbed some lunch and a drink and sat with her. We went throughout the usual small talk before she started telling me what had been going on. R rang Z on Thursday morning saying he had nowhere to go and could he stay with them for a few days. Z spoke to N and they agreed he could stay in their guest room. R went to their house after work, and they had a long talk where R told them he has a flat lined up but can't move until January. Z and N agreed to let him live with them until January as long as he followed some basic rules and paid for his own food. The rules were things like no bringing women back there, and if he went out drinking, he had to be quiet when he got back so he didn't wake their daughter, who's 6. He agreed to all this and paid for a Chinese for them all that night. The next day after work, R went to meet his dad in the pub for a few pints. When Z and N went to bed, R still wasn't home. They were woken up at about 2 o'clock in the morning by R arguing with a woman. Apparently, R had met this woman in a bar, took her back to Z and N's house, got his pleasure, and then told her to get dressed and off once he was done. She had gotten angry, which started an argument where R was saying some horrific things to her. Z took the woman downstairs and got her a taxi whilst N stayed upstairs arguing with R. Once N had got rid of the woman, she went back upstairs and tried to calm Z and R down. At this point, R decided to take out his frustrations on N, calling her a cunt, and telling her to do something useful and make him a sandwich, before bursting out laughing like he'd made the funniest joke ever. This made Z lose it and pinned R to the wall by his throat. Side note, R isn't a fighter at all, whereas Z was an amateur boxer in his youth and can handle himself well, and managed to get Z to let him go, and R was shoved in the guest room and told to sleep off the alcohol. It's a miracle that N's daughter didn't wake up during this. The next morning, N got their daughter ready and went to her mom's after telling Z to get R out of their house. Z agreed, and after N left, he woke R up and told him to pack his bags and leave. R tried to apologize and begged to stay, but Z was having none of it and kicked him out. Going off the timing, I think he left there and came straight to my house on Sunday. Z texted R to meet up so that they could speak, and they met up in a pub. Z has been friends with R since they were 11 and has never seen him act like he has been doing, so he wanted to find out what was really going on. He managed to finally get the truth out of R. Basically, R has been in contact with his dad for a lot longer than he told us. By this point, it's over 2 years. His dad is a raging misogynist that believes a woman's place is in the kitchen and bedroom. A man's place is to rule the house and be waited on hand and foot, as well as deciding who can and cannot be in their lives. He's been dripping this poison into R's ear, and it's really taken a hold of him. Z told N that he just doesn't recognize R anymore, as R wants to start living his life the way his father has told him he should. When Z pointed out that R's dad is 62, living in a shitty one-bedroom flat, not had a real relationship since R's mom left him, has no friends, his family doesn't speak to him, and that he's the type of guy that when he walks into a pub, people finish their pints so they can leave and get away from him, R was furious. He told Z that his dad is just misunderstood. Z responded that people understood his dad, and that's why they stayed away from him. He's toxic. This pretty much ended their conversation, and R left. Z did find out that R does have a flat lined up for January, so that was true, and that he's found a B&B he can stay until the flat is ready at a minimal cost. Z and N have also decided to go and see with R, as they don't need that toxicity around them, but especially not around their daughter. A few Redditors had said it sounded like R was on drugs, so I asked N what she thought, and she doesn't think so, but can't be sure. She and Z think that R is just so far under his dad's thumb now that he's completely changed as a person. He believes that everything his dad says is gospel. She did let me know that R has a burner IG account that he is using to check on my IG, and I immediately made my account private. He had said something about seeing me waste money on a stupid amount of Christmas presents, when I couldn't even help him out to Z on Sunday. I'd been to a Christmas market on Saturday afternoon and had posted pics on IG. All of this just made my resolve stronger that he will not be getting anywhere near my house again. It also made me realize that I don't have any feeling for him anymore other than frustration at how he's acting and some sadness at how far he's fallen from the man I once knew. I thought that hearing he'd had another woman in his bed would annoy me, but there was just nothing. Couldn't have cared less. I thanked N for the info and we agreed to keep in touch. We won't be as close as we were when I was with R, but it feels good to have someone who knows the entire situation and has seen R's behavior with his own eyes. There were also some Redditors that told me to ditch the friends that had told me to let him stay with me. Unfortunately, I can't ditch them completely as they're part of the friend group, and that would just cause unnecessary drama, but I will be keeping my distance from them and only talking to them when part of the group. I'm currently at my sister's, and we are going to watch a Christmas film to get us in the mood to decorate all our houses this weekend. So I will be on and off for the next few hours if anyone has any questions. Thanks for the votes and giving me some perspective. Reddit isn't all bad. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Let my wife stay friends with her ex for years, despite my gut feeling. Then I caught them making out, and now I've kicked her out of our house and business. Hi everyone, so we have been living together for almost 10 years, married for 3. My wife, who I'll call Hannah, dated a guy who I'll call Patrick from ages 18 to 20 and then on and off for another year. We started dating when she was still seeing him, but I was aware of him. Then I sort of gave her an ultimatum, saying that I wanted to make things serious, and she cut him off. He ended up moving up north for work and had stayed there for a number of years. We are 32, he's 41. This is going to be a long one. We are inseparable, both in our personal and professional lives. running a thriving small business together. Our friends often tease us about how perfect we are together and how we hardly fight. Despite this one issue, we have an incredibly happy and successful relationship and business. We work well together, we see eye to eye. For the last 10 years, we've spent nearly every day together. Every now and then, she would run into Patrick, whether it was on special occasions like birthdays and holidays or just by chance every few months. She stayed friends with him, and I was aware of this. I never felt threatened by him. She was very much done with him, or so she claimed to me. They would usually meet up for dinner or coffee for an hour or two to catch up. Oddly enough, I never saw him during these encounters. He made sure to keep his time with my wife private, concealing it from his own family. However, there have been times in all these years where we'd meet for a double date, or my wife and I would meet him for dinner, lunch, or breakfast together. He acted buddy with me. He asked me questions about business. We had some of the same hobbies in common. Honestly, it just felt like we had to be friendly to each other for the sake of Hannah. It has always puzzled me why my wife continued to keep in touch with him, even after he repeatedly cheated on her while they were dating. From what she told me, he was awful to her. He'd actually back out of plans we'd all make together. He'd say he was coming over for a barbecue at our place but would cancel last minute. This happened quite a few times. She showed incredible dedication and care when she helped him recover from a serious motorcycle accident, feeding him in bed for months, taking care of him, bathing him, watching over his house. I didn't think much of it at first, and I trusted my wife's judgment, even though I strongly disagreed with her decision to stay connected with someone who had hurt her multiple times. She'd always be quick to say about any friends who did the same to me, she'd want me to cut them off. But then I'd simply remind her of how she treated Patrick, and then she'd kind of shut up. I should say that this Patrick fellow also comes across as an EFF boy. He's always coming up with these dirty stories that seem inappropriate to say, especially to someone's wife. But Hannah always laughs and says, "That's just Patrick. I'm not about it." One day, I noticed her phone light up on the coffee table and saw that he had sent her a super sexual joke, like something that sort of crossed the line. It was something along the lines of basically asking her to be a third for him and his GF at the time. And I say GF, but it was just a woman he'd hook up with every now and again. I was immediately taken aback and brought it up to her, explaining how inappropriate it was. She assured me she would talk to him and that it would never happen again. She tried to tell me again that it was just him, and he was harmless and didn't mean anything by it. I chalked it up to him being a sleazebag. However, a few months later, I caught him doing the same thing again, and I was beyond freaked out. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was just not right. So when she fell asleep, I went through her texts. As uncomfortable and disgusting as it was, I needed to know. What I found were more sexual jokes and even some texts criticizing me. In a fit of rage, I immediately woke her up, scrolling through the messages with her, and basically forbid her from seeing him ever again. If this behavior continued, I said, it's totally inappropriate for him to be messaging her this, no matter how close of friends they were. I said, no other male friends send her things like this, and he's totally disrespecting me and our relationship. She stopped seeing him and messaging for several months after that incident. After a year or so, she manages to convince me to be okay with it once again. Maybe it was because he needed some real estate advice and we happened to work in the field, or maybe I was just worn down after a year. Either way, I agreed to meet him for coffee with Hannah. It seemed fine and normal for some time, but I couldn't shake off the unease and continued reading their texts, which disgusted me. Eventually, I found more inappropriate jokes from him. I reached my breaking point and firmly declared that this would be the last time this happens, or I'd be leaving. I said if this happens again, she's clearly disrespecting me. She tried to say that he's always been like this and it's pretty harmless. It's just his sense of humor. I say, no, I'm not having it. I'm serious, Hannah. I'm not going to let another man talk to my wife like that. From then on, she promised not to engage in conversations like that with him and would only communicate about work-related matters. Now a year later, somehow once again, dumbass me, I come around to allowing them to hang out. But I am not happy about it, and I hold back from telling her so, and it becomes our sole problem in our relationship. It becomes all we fight about. I effing hate him, but I love her so much, so I let her, and it's only every couple months or so, so whatever. Anyway, fast forward to the last couple months. I notice they are talking way more often. She's going into a different room if he calls her. Her voice totally changes. Lots of phone calls and texts. She's laughing after reading whatever it is he sends. Yeah, we have access to each other's locations because we are married, and I came home late from work a few times and took my time coming back from a men's hockey league on more than one occasion. And she had a fit, so she insisted on sharing our locations together. Sure, I'm not guilty of anything other than being a little late. Well, Patrick ends up finding a job in the city near us and moves back. I never thought to check in on her, but now I can't help myself. Every time she goes out, I'm checking her location. She's not home one day. She seemed a bit skittish, telling me that she was going to a friend's place to help her organize her closet. I'm like, okay. She's never been one to organize anything in her life. I didn't believe a word she said, but I hoped I was wrong in assuming she was with Patrick. I see that she was at an unfamiliar address. Curious, I give her a call and ask what she's up to. Her voice sounds strange, and she tells me she's at a friend's house. I'm like, what friend? She says, Dana's. I'm like, Dana, doesn't she live on the south side? And she's like, yeah, why? And I'm like, I know where Dana lives, and it's not the location that you're currently at. Say hello to Patrick for me. She tries to say something, but I cut her off and hang up the phone. She tries to call me, but I don't answer. She hurries home, terrified that she has been caught spending time with him and telling a lie. The thought of getting caught makes her so anxious that she starts throwing up. We get in this huge fight, and I tell her that I'm leaving. I've packed a bag. She's on the ground, dry heaving and hyperventilating. We're supposed to meet with one of these big clients for work the next day, but I tell her to not bother coming into work, or I'll have her arrested for trespassing. She's literally sobbing at my feet as I'm leaving the house. The next day, she doesn't show up to work. My mind is racing. I'm trying to deal with one of our biggest clients yet, but my mind isn't all there. It's torture. She texts me, and it's full of apologies for lying about where she was and for the fight that night, but insists that nothing happened with Patrick. She said she only lied because she didn't want me to get mad, because she knew I wouldn't be happy with her going to his house by herself. She said he needed a hand unpacking the last of his stuff. I try to keep my cool and focus on the task at hand, but my thoughts are consumed by the truth behind her words and my own insecurities. Despite his sporadic presence in her life over the years, I can't stop my mind from wandering to thoughts of him and comparing myself to him. He's incredibly wealthy, and I'm certainly not, despite our prosperous business. And yeah, Patrick is a pretty good-looking guy. He knows how to dress himself. He takes care of himself. He likes the finer things in life. These thoughts haunt me even when we're together intimately. I try to brush them off, but they persist. I don't trust my wife with him, and that's what it boils down to. I stayed that night at work. I text her and tell her not to come in again tomorrow. I decide that I'll go home the next day at lunch to talk to her. Like a psycho for the last few days, I've gone in and checked her location, but she's been at home the whole time. I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is all in my head. I'm thinking maybe I'm the bad guy for treating her like this. Maybe I'm overreacting. The next day, I check her location before I leave work, and she's at home. I decide not to let her know I'm on my way, and instead I was going to surprise her. Well, I get there. Her car is in the driveway. Her phone is on the counter, but she's nowhere to be seen. I'm thinking maybe she went for a walk, so I wait. Nothing. Her purse is gone. Her running shoes are in the closet, but her keys to lock up are gone. Someone must have come to pick her up. She left her phone at home so I wouldn't know her location. So I had a hunch. I remember the address of his house, and I think, before I head back to work, I'm going to drive by just to see what I find. I park down the street from the house and decide I'm going to walk up to it. If I see anything, I'll walk up to the door and pop in just to say hi. I get up to the house, and there's a big bay window, and as my eyes adjust, I can see into the window just enough to see Hannah and Patrick sitting on the couch. She's on his lap, kissing him, and her arms are wrapped around him. I pause for a few seconds in shock. Then I pull out my phone and start taking photos and videos. I walk right up to the window, and they're too enthralled with each other to notice I'm there. Then I bang on the glass, and suddenly they jump up and see me. I'm like, smile for the camera. I make it back to work and think of all the times they must have been together. Out of the dozens and dozens of times I've let them get together, it can't just be the one time, right? My trust in her is completely shattered. I can't believe those were the only 2 times they met up despite all the suggestive and sexual texts between them. She expects me to believe that they only made out for a short time. We are adults, for God's sake. Who just makes out these days? And even if that was the truth, it doesn't change the fact that I have expressed my discomfort with their relationship for years. She always brushed it off and tried to convince me it was nothing, even though she knew it bothered me deeply. Even her own friends and family have scolded her for seeing him after how he hurt her before. How could she do this to our relationship? Was anything ever real? And I'm partially to blame. I should have stopped things from the start. I should have walked away earlier. But I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe so badly that he was nothing but a friend who didn't know how to stay within the boundaries. He was clearly never threatened by me. He knew exactly what he was doing. Do you think she never moved on from him? Maybe she convinced herself that their relationship was just a friendship, and now she'll do anything to get his attention. Has anyone else experienced this? What should I do? I hate that I have to share this. I don't want our mutual friends to find out. Update 1. Alright, it's been 3 months, and I've talked to a divorce attorney about separation and divorce, and that's been messy because we own a business together. I was a nervous wreck for a few weeks after sending her the formal notification. She tried to deny everything and even tried to countersue me for defamation and emotional distress, but I had all the evidence, and she knew it. I had to include any and all relevant communications, such as texts, photos, and videos, that confirmed her actions. So that was also fun. The funny thing about that is she was in breach of a partnership agreement that we signed when we started the business. I was able to formally notify Hannah in writing that she was in breach of the partnership agreement due to her infidelity. This notification clearly outlined the specific provision of the agreement that she had violated and the consequences of her breach. Thus, she's about to no longer be a co-owner or a business partner. Sucks to suck. Guess she should have thought of this when she was sucking face with Patrick. All of this means that she's going to be transferring her ownership shares to me. At the same time, the house was under my name, and my father had co-signed for us at the time, so she's been out of the house. She went to stay with her cousin and then eventually moved in with Patrick. My heartbreaking conversations with some of our mutual friends confirmed what I'd feared. She never moved on from Patrick. She would talk about him constantly with some of our mutual friends, and they always thought it was suspicious. One of our friends, Lynn, even said that she told Hannah that if she mentions him one more time to her that she'd tell me everything. She said Lynn apologized for not telling me sooner. I've sought therapy to help me cope with the emotional turmoil, and I've learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I made in our relationship. I've sought solace in new friends and hobbies. I'm slowly gaining back my sense of self. I know it's hard to believe, but it's a relief in a way, right? I've been carrying this weight of doubt and mistrust, and now I finally have the proof confirming what I feared all along. Some of our friends didn't see it coming. They thought all was sunny in Coolsville. Signing off. Update 2. It's been 10 months now since I filed for divorce. The business is officially mine. What a relief. Lynn told me that Hannah called her up recently to stay with her as she uncovered that Patrick was seeing someone behind her back. So she moved out and she's back at her cousin's. Ironic, isn't it? She still doesn't have a job. She's been trying to start up her own thing, though she faces the challenge of building it from the ground up since I retained all the clientele. Consequently, she was unable to transfer any existing business. I believe I contributed the majority of the business acumen to our endeavors. As I continue to rebuild my life, I find myself wondering what it was about me that made me so blind to the truth. It's unsettling to think that I could have been so wrong about someone I loved. Our mutual friends have been incredibly supportive throughout this entire ordeal. Even though some of them were taken aback by the revelation, they've offered to help with the business or to just be there for me as I navigate this new chapter in my life. I appreciate them more than words can express. I decided to take my friend's advice and dip my toes back into the dating world. It was nerve-wracking at first, but meeting new people helped me realize that there was more to life than dwelling on the past. I went on a few dates, some good and some not so good, but each one taught me something about myself and what I was looking for in a partner. She's pretty great so far, but we're just having fun and getting to know each other. Life is moving forward. I've learned my lesson about trust and communication, and I'm no longer willing to compromise on those things in a relationship. I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned and the relationships I've built throughout this journey. It's been a difficult road, but I've come out stronger and wiser. I'm excited to see what the future holds and to continue moving forward in life. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My parents want me out of the house after my failed surgery left me blind. My sister is coming home and doesn't want me there. For months ago, I went in for what should have been a routine laser eye surgery. I had worn thick glasses since childhood and was excited to finally be free of them. The procedure was expensive, but my parents had offered to help cover the costs as a graduation gift. They were proud of me, finishing college with honors and landing a prestigious job at a graphic design firm. The surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks before my start date. The day of the surgery, everything seemed normal at first. The doctors went through their usual preparations, and I remember feeling nervous but optimistic. My mom held my hand as they administered the anesthetic. That was the last time I would ever see her face clearly. Something went catastrophically wrong during the procedure. I woke up to searing pain and complete darkness. The doctors later explained that there had been an unexpected complication, a rare reaction that caused severe damage to both my retinas. Multiple emergency surgeries followed, but nothing could restore my sight. The darkness became permanent. The medical investigation revealed that the laser machine had malfunctioned during my procedure, but because I had signed all the consent forms acknowledging the risks, we had limited legal recourse. The surgery center's internal review claimed it was a known complication, despite the machine malfunction. 3 different lawyers told us that medical malpractice cases involving LASIK were notoriously difficult to win, especially since the consent forms I signed were extremely comprehensive about potential risks. The surgery center initially tried to absolve themselves of all responsibility, but after weeks of back and forth and threats of media exposure, they offered a settlement. The amount barely covered the cost of the emergency procedures, let alone my ongoing care needs. My parents' insurance became another nightmare to deal with. They refused to pay for most of my rehabilitation needs, claiming the surgery was elective and any resulting complications weren't covered under our policy. The insurance company's exact words were that my voluntary decision to undergo cosmetic surgery negated their responsibility for subsequent adverse events. We're still fighting them through an insurance advocate, but the process is painfully slow. Meanwhile, my parents have already drained their savings trying to cover everything. The rehabilitation equipment, the adaptive technology one need to function, and the modifications to our house. They even took out a second mortgage on our home. I later found out that my dad had cashed out his 401k early, taking the tax penalty hit, just so we could afford the basic equipment I needed. The financial strain has only added to the emotional toll on our family. My mom tried to hide the mounting bills from me, but I could hear her crying late at night when she thought I was asleep. She would argue with my dad about credit card payments and loan applications. One night, I overheard her saying they might have to sell the house if things didn't improve. The guilt of knowing I was the cause of their financial ruin was almost worse than losing my sight. To think that all of this happened because I wanted to get rid of my glasses. Sometimes the weight of that decision feels unbearable. The first few weeks were a nightmare of adjustments. Simple tasks like eating or going to the bathroom became monumental challenges. My parents converted our living room into my bedroom since I couldn't manage the stairs anymore. They helped me learn to navigate with a cane, read Braille, and use adaptive technology. My mom took leave from her job to be my full-time caregiver while my dad worked extra hours to cover the mounting medical bills. The job offer was rescinded within a week of my failed surgery. The email was coldly professional. While they expressed sympathy for my situation, they stated that the position's core requirements include visual design capabilities that are no longer compatible with your condition. I had spent 4 years specializing in UI/UX design, maintaining a perfect GPA, and completing 3 competitive internships to land this role. Now, in one automated email, my career was over before it began. My dreams of financial independence crumbled overnight. The $75,000 starting salary I had been promised would have let me help my parents repay the surgery costs while building my own life. Instead, I found myself applying for disability benefits, a process so complex and humiliating that it took 3 rejected applications and nearly 6 months before I received any assistance. The monthly payments barely covered my medical expenses, let alone helping my parents with their mounting debt. Some days, I couldn't even find the motivation to get out of bed. The darkness felt both literal and metaphorical, crushing me under its weight. My parents remained patient through my darkest moments, though I know it wasn't easy for them. My mom would sit with me for hours, describing the world outside my window or reading me job listings for positions that might be adapted for someone without sight. My dad spent his weekends teaching me to navigate our house by memory, counting steps between furniture and creating tactile markers on doorways. Together, they helped me slowly rebuild my life, piece by piece, teaching me to find worth beyond what I could see or create visually. Then, last month, everything changed. My older sister, Maya, announced she was coming home for an extended visit. She's been living in Europe for the past 8 years, working as a successful fashion photographer. Her work appears in major magazines, and from what my parents tell me, she's built quite a name for herself in the industry. They keep a collection of magazines featuring her work, though obviously I can't see them anymore. We were never particularly close growing up. She's 10 years older and moved out when I was still in elementary school. I have faint memories of her teaching me to braid my hair before she left for college, but after that, our interactions became increasingly sparse. The age gap meant we were always at different life stages. While she was starting her career in Europe, I was just entering high school. During my college years, she'd occasionally send expensive birthday gifts, designer clothes or accessories, but rarely called or visited. Our conversations, when they happened, were surface level. How's school? How's the weather? The usual small talk between distant relatives rather than sisters. When my surgery went wrong, my mom had to read me Maya's email response because I was still learning to use screen readers. The message was barely 3 lines long. I'm so sorry to hear about what happened. This must be really difficult for everyone. Sending you strength during this time. It was clearly a courtesy response, the kind you'd send to a distant acquaintance rather than your sister. She never followed up, never called, never asked how I was coping. For months, I held on to hope that maybe she'd reach out properly, but the only updates I got about her life came through our parents' dinner conversations about her latest photo shoot or gallery opening. Her announcement about visiting home was the first direct contact we'd had since that email. Mom read me the text message over breakfast. Great news! Coming home for 2 months this spring. Got someone special I want you all to meet. Dad immediately started planning a family gathering, and Mom spent the afternoon calling relatives. In all the excitement, no one seemed to notice how quiet I'd become. After 8 years of distance and silence, Maya was finally coming home, and somehow that news filled me with more anxiety than joy. Yesterday, my parents called me into the living room, saying they needed to discuss something important about Maya's visit. I could tell from their voices and the way they were moving around that something was wrong. Then they dropped the bomb. They wanted me to move out before Maya arrives. They had already researched assisted living facilities and talked to real estate agents about short-term rentals. They kept talking about how they'd help with the costs and how this could be a growth opportunity for me to become more independent. When I asked why this was suddenly necessary, they finally admitted the truth. Maya's fiancé doesn't know she has a blind sister, and she wants to keep it that way. According to them, Maya thinks my presence would make things uncomfortable and ruin the perfect visit she's planning. When I reminded them that I'm still learning basic adaptive skills and have no income, my mom just said they were exhausted from caring for me. My dad added that at 23, I should be living independently anyway. It was pretty clear that Maya had given them some kind of ultimatum, and they'd chosen her side. The successful daughter was coming home, and they needed to hide away the disabled one. The betrayal cut deep. During my darkest moments, my family had been my lifeline. Now they were choosing my sister's comfort over my basic needs. I spent the next few days reaching out to every friend and relative I could think of, but no one was equipped to take in someone with my needs. Most of my friends had moved away after graduation, starting new lives in different cities. Then I remembered my maternal grandmother, who I hadn't seen since I was a child. My mom had cut ties with her parents years ago over what she would only describe as irreconcilable differences. When I suggested reaching out to them, my mom became extremely agitated. She forbade me from making contact, insisting they were toxic people who would only make things worse. Her reaction only strengthened my determination to understand what had really happened. Why had we cut ties so completely? Why did my mother seem almost panicked at the thought of me contacting them? I found myself wondering if there were family secrets I'd never been told, especially given Maya's constant distance from our family. Now I'm torn about what to do. My parents have given me 2 weeks to find new living arrangements. They insist this is for my own good, that I need to learn independence, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm being discarded because I no longer fit the perfect family image my sister wants to present. The thought of reaching out to my grandparents feels both terrifying and necessary. They might be my only option, but contacting them could open old wounds I don't fully understand. Am I wrong for considering reaching out to my grandparents against my mother's wishes? Should I respect the family boundaries that have been in place for decades, or fight for my right to stay in my home? I feel completely lost and abandoned by the people I trusted most. Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone who commented and sent messages of support. Reading them through my screen reader has been overwhelming but incredibly touching. Many of you asked about reaching out to my grandparents and why my mom is so against it, so I'll try to explain what I know. The thing is, I don't know much about my mom's parents at all. Growing up, they were never mentioned except when my mom would say, "They're not good people and we're better off without them." I've never even seen a photo of them since my mom got rid of all family pictures years ago. I did try asking my dad about it once, but he just said it was my mom's business and changed the subject. The weird part is, after reading your comments, I'm starting to notice things I never questioned before, like how Maya constantly seems uncomfortable around me, or how my parents never talk about any relatives from my mom's side. A few of you suggested there might be some big family secret, and honestly, you might be right. The way my mom completely freaked out when I mentioned contacting my grandparents seems extreme for just a normal family disagreement. I've decided I'm going to try finding my grandparents. Several people messaged me suggesting ways to locate them, and I've already started following some leads. At this point, what do I have to lose? My parents are kicking me out anyway, and I need somewhere to go. If my grandparents turn out to be as terrible as my mom claims, at least I'll know the truth. I'll update again when I know more. Update 2. It's been a week since I last updated. Just wanted to let everyone know that I finally talked to my grandma. After all the support and advice I received on Reddit, I realized I had nothing to lose by reaching out to my grandparents. Also, reaching out to them felt like my last shot at finding a safe place, not just physically but emotionally. So, I started my search by trying to connect with anyone on my mom's side of the family. With no direct contact, I turned to LinkedIn, where I eventually found someone who seemed to be related to her, a distant cousin of hers, if I guessed correctly. Reaching out felt awkward, and I debated for hours over what to say. In the end, I kept it straightforward, explaining that I was looking for a way to contact my grandparents and emphasizing that it was important. I urged them to share with me my grandparents' contact number. At first, they were hesitant. They asked why I wanted their contact information and seemed uncomfortable, almost like they didn't want to get involved. But after some back and forth and a bit of pleading, they relented. I was given my grandmother's number. I was so nervous to call her that I had to take 2 days just to think things over. Was I really doing the right thing by contacting her? I wasn't sure. When I finally mustered the courage to call that number, my heart was racing. I used my speech-to-text software to make sure I dialed correctly, and after a few rings, my grandma picked up. I took a deep breath and introduced myself. I told her who I was and who my mother is. There was silence on the other end for what felt like forever. Then she spoke, her voice a mix of surprise and weariness. I didn't expect to ever hear from you. How did you find me? I explained briefly how I got her number and why I was calling. She seemed pleasantly surprised that I had reached out to her. I took this as a good sign and started to tell her more about my situation. My life until now, my failed surgery, my parents asking me to leave, and how I felt like I had no one else to turn to. Her tone softened as I spoke, though I could still sense hesitation. She told me how sorry she was that I was going through all of this, that I had been kicked out at my lowest point. But then she added something that left me stunned. I can't say I'm all that surprised though, not with Maya coming to visit now after so long. I froze and asked her what she meant by that. Was there some family secret that I didn't know? There was a pause on her end, like my grandma was carefully considering how to phrase her next words. Well, she began slowly, I don't know how much your family has shared with you, but there's a reason we haven't been in touch. I told her I didn't know much, only that my mom had said they hated us. At that, my grandmother let out a humorless laugh. Hate is a strong word, but there's a lot your mother hasn't told you. What she revealed next left me shaken to my core. She told me that years ago, my mother had orchestrated a massive investment fraud scheme that devastated both my grandparents and several other family members. My grandmother explained that my mother had convinced them to invest their retirement savings in what turned out to be a complete scam. When everything fell apart, my mother refused to take responsibility, claiming she was also a victim. But my grandparents discovered evidence that she had actually received significant kickbacks from the scheme. The scandal tore the family apart. Maya, who was old enough to understand what happened, witnessed how our mother's actions destroyed our grandparents' retirement plans and affected multiple relatives. That's why she distanced herself from our family, especially after our mother never showed any remorse or tried to make amends. What does that have to do with me being kicked out? I asked, my voice trembling. She hesitated again and then said, I think your parents, your mother especially, are desperate to keep things peaceful now that Maya is returning after so long. They've been trying to mend their relationship with her for years, and well, I'm sorry to say this, but I think they see you as a complication. Maya has probably told her fiancé about our family's past, but having a blind sister who needs constant care might raise too many questions about where your parents' money went and why they can't afford to help you. All my life, I had felt like there was something off, like there were pieces of my family puzzle missing. Now it all made sense. Why my mom's side of the family was a complete mystery, why Maya had always been distant, and even why my parents seemed so desperate to hide me away now. In the end, my grandma assured me that no matter what had happened, she and my grandfather never blamed me for any of this. They had wanted to reach out to me many times over the years, but my mother had threatened legal action if they tried to contact me. My grandmother surprised me by saying, You're innocent in all of this. You're our grandchild, and we'd like to help if you'll let us. Her words brought me to tears. I told her how much it meant to hear her say that, especially after everything I'd been through. My grandma then said something that changed everything. You can stay with us. We have plenty of space, and we can hire whatever help you need for your condition. You won't have to be alone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For a while, I had started to feel unwanted, like a burden no one wanted to carry, and here was my grandma offering me her home. I immediately accepted her offer and told her to give me some time to figure things out. Now I'm preparing to leave. My grandmother has assured me that they'll help me get settled and support me as I continue learning to live independently. As for my parents, I haven't told them yet. I plan on confronting them just before I leave. I can't stand to even look at my mother's face after finding out about everything. Update 3. Okay, so I finally confronted my parents and moved out from my home. At first, when my grandparents came to visit to help me pack up my things, my mom was furious. Seeing them standing at our doorstep, my dad later told me her face had turned completely white, as if she'd seen a ghost. She screamed at them, asking what they were doing here, but I calmly told her that they were here for me. Her voice turned shrill. What the hell have you done? She yelled. You were never supposed to contact them again. Why would you go behind my back? This is when I asked my mom and dad to sit down and told them that we needed to talk. Even though I couldn't see them, I could feel the tension in the room. Mom's bracelets were jingling constantly, her nervous tick that I'd grown so familiar with. Dad was completely silent, which usually meant he knew he was in the wrong. "I know everything," I said quietly. "About the investment scheme, about how you stole from our family, about why Maya really left." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom started to sputter excuses, trying to paint herself as the victim, just as my grandmother said she would. "They're lying to you," she insisted. "They've always been jealous of my success. They're trying to turn you against me, just like they did with Maya." But I wasn't having any of it. I'd prepared for this conversation using my phone to record everything. "I've talked to other relatives too," I told her. "I know exactly how many people lost their retirement savings. I know about the kickbacks you received. I know everything." Dad tried to intervene, claiming they'd made mistakes, but it's changed. That's when I cut him off. "Changed? You're literally trying to hide me away because Maya's fiancé might ask too many questions about where your money went. You're choosing to throw out your blind daughter rather than face the consequences of what you did." My mom's tone suddenly shifted from defensive to pleading. "We've been taking care of you for months," she said. "We've spent so much on your medical bills, your equipment, everything you needed. How can you be so ungrateful?" That's when my grandmother, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Medical bills that wouldn't have been necessary if you hadn't pushed her to get that surgery right after graduation. Let me guess, you convinced her to use her savings for it, didn't you? Just like you convinced us to invest in your scheme." Mom went ballistic at that point. She started screaming about how they had no right to be in her house, how they were trying to steal her daughter just like they'd stolen Maya. But through her ranting, one thing became crystal clear. She had never denied any of the allegations. "The only reason we suggested that surgery," my mom finally said, her voice quieter but still bitter, "was because we thought it would help your career. We were trying to make things easier for you. How were we supposed to know it would go wrong? And now that it has gone wrong," I responded. "Now that I'm not the perfect daughter you can show off anymore, you want to hide me away, just like you hid away what you did to our family." That's when my dad finally spoke up properly. He admitted that they had been wrong about so many things, but claimed they were just trying to protect me. "From what?" I asked. "From knowing the truth about my own family? From having a relationship with my grandparents who actually want to help me?" He tried to explain that they were desperate to reconcile with Maya, that her fiancé came from a prominent family, and having a disabled sister who needed financial support would raise too many uncomfortable questions. "So you decided to throw me away instead," I concluded. "Make me someone else's problem." The more they talked, the more their true colors showed. Every excuse, every justification, just revealed how they viewed me. Not as their daughter, but as a complication to be managed. When they realized they couldn't deny the truth anymore, they switched to threats. Mom started talking about legal action, about how I was making a huge mistake trusting my grandparents. That's when my grandfather, who had been quietly loading my things into their car, came back in. He put a hand on my shoulder and said something I'll never forget. "We've already contacted our lawyer. Everything's been documented. Your parents' demand for you to leave, the refusal to continue supporting you, everything. If anyone should be worried about legal consequences, it's not us." I had already packed most of my important documents and belongings over the past few days while they were at work. My grandparents helped me gather the rest of my things. My adaptive equipment, my clothes, the few mementos I wanted to keep. Mom alternated between threats and tears the whole time, while Dad just stood there silently. Just before we left, Mom made one last attempt. "If you leave with them," she said, "don't expect to ever come back. You're choosing them over your own parents." I turned to her. Even though I couldn't see her face, I wanted her to hear my words clearly. "No, Mom. You chose Maya's visit over me. You chose keeping your secrets over having a relationship with your parents. You've always chosen yourself over everyone else. I'm just finally choosing myself for once." The drive to my grandparents' house was quiet. I could have fallen apart, could have cried or screamed about the unfairness of it all. Instead, I felt strangely peaceful. For the first time since losing my sight, I felt like I could finally see everything clearly. My grandparents have been amazing. They've hired an occupational therapist to help me continue my adaptation training, and they're having the house modified to be more accessible for me. My grandfather has been researching text-to-speech software and other adaptive technologies, always asking what else I need. My grandmother sits with me every evening, filling in the blanks of our family history, helping me understand the past that was kept from me. Maya sent me an email after finding out I'd moved in with our grandparents. She apologized for her part in my parents' decision to kick me out, admitting she had given them an ultimatum about my presence during her visit. She explained that her fiancé knew everything about our mother's past and that she'd been honest with him about having a blind sister. The real reason she didn't want me there was that she couldn't bear to see how our parents were treating me. It brought back too many memories of how they had betrayed our family years ago. She's promised to visit me at our grandparents' house after her initial visit with our parents is over. Maybe there's hope for rebuilding that relationship too, though I'm taking things one day at a time. As for my parents, they've been calling and texting constantly since I left, alternating between apologies and accusations. I've blocked their numbers. The only communication I'll have with them now will be through my grandparents' lawyer, who is helping me secure my legal rights and remaining assets. It's strange how losing my sight ultimately led me to see the truth about my family. I'm still learning to navigate this new life, both my blindness and my new understanding of my past, but for the first time, I feel like I have people around me who are genuinely supporting me, not just tolerating me until I become inconvenient. To everyone who encouraged me to reach out to my grandparents, thank you. You helped me find not just a new home, but the truth I've been kept from my entire life. Sometimes the family you need isn't the one you were born into, but the one that chooses to stand by you when everything falls apart. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My sister walked into our lives after disappearing for 6 years and started dating my husband's cousin. But then she got drunk and confessed her love for my husband. 6 years ago, I cut ties with my sister, Mindy, after I caught her repeatedly flirting with my then-boyfriend, now husband, Richard, who was clearly uncomfortable. What made it even worse was that my parents never seemed to care at all. They acted like it was perfectly normal for my sister to cozy up to the man I was dating and thought it was just a phase for her. For context, Mindy is my younger sister. In the early years, I don't think Mindy resented me quite as much as she would later on. I remember there was a time when I adored her, when the thought of being estranged from her would have seemed impossible. We would always play together, and I was the one who taught her to ride a bike. But when we started growing up, it became more and more apparent how different our personalities were. Academically, I tended to do well in school without much struggle, whereas Mindy had a harder time. She wasn't unintelligent by any means, but for whatever reason, school didn't come as easily to her. This started to become a point of contention at home since our parents stressed a lot on our grades. Seeing that Mindy wasn't performing well, our parents would always make comparisons. They'd use me as an example for her to follow, constantly telling her to try harder, to do better, as if I were the benchmark for what she should be. I could tell how much it frustrated her, and honestly, I can't blame her for being upset. It must have been hard to constantly hear how she wasn't measuring up to her older sister. I would try to talk to her about it and even help her with her homework, but with constant criticism, she started to withdraw from me. Then, as teenagers, there was the matter of how we spent our time after school. Now, I'm more of an introvert, so my evenings were usually quiet, filled with studying or reading a book in my room. I found comfort in my own company, which is just how I've always been. Mindy, on the other hand, was always much more social. She loved going out and hanging with her friends, and she thrived in that environment. She wasn't a bad kid for wanting to go to parties or school events like prom. It was just who she was. But because I preferred to stay home, our parents would use me as an excuse to keep her home as well. They'd say things like, "Your sister's at home studying, why can't you do the same?" Or, "If she doesn't go to parties, why should you?" It was completely unfair to her, and I knew it. I didn't have any issue with her wanting to go out and have fun, but our parents would make it seem like I was the standard she should follow. This only ended up making her angrier. She slowly started to take that frustration out on me, calling me boring and a nerd because I didn't have the same social life she craved. I could see how much she resented the restrictions our parents placed on her, but it hurt that she would direct her anger at me. I tried explaining to her that it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't the one keeping her at home, but she knew she couldn't blame our parents, so she would direct her anger on me instead. As time went on, the tension between Mindy and me escalated. What started as small disagreements grew into more frequent and intense fights. Mindy began attacking me by commenting about my appearance. She'd make snide comments about my hair, my weight, or anything else she could think of. One of her favorite jabs was to compare both of our looks. She'd laugh and point out how I supposedly took after our dad, and that made me uglier than her. She'd say things like, "Well, you got dad's nose and shoulders, so no wonder you look so masculine for a woman." It was a hurtful comparison since I had never even thought about my own body like that until then. No matter how many times I told her to knock it off, she would just find something else to pick on. One day, I made a casual comment to my mom in front of Mindy about how my old jeans didn't fit anymore. It wasn't a big deal, just an observation about how my body had changed over time. My mom, being understanding, reassured me that it was perfectly normal for our bodies to change as women and that I had nothing to worry about. But Mindy saw it as an opportunity to take a shot at me. With a smirk on her face, she snickered and said, "Well, you're starting to look like a pig. Maybe this is a sign for you to get off your fat ass and start working out more." That comment hit me hard. I remember feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. My mother immediately stepped in and berated her for being so nasty. But even though my mom was on my side, Mindy's words stuck with me. It wasn't that I had been overweight or unhealthy before, but hearing something like that from my own younger sister got under my skin in a way that was hard to explain. Eventually, I decided that enough was enough. I made up my mind to start working out, not to prove anything to her, but for myself. I wanted to feel stronger and healthier, and I thought that maybe exercise would help clear my head also. So I started doing light dumbbell workouts at home and began running every morning. As I got more into it day by day, I realized how much I enjoyed it. I wasn't just working out because of what Mindy said anymore. I loved the feeling of accomplishment that came with getting stronger and improving my stamina. It became something I looked forward to, a positive outlet for all the negative emotions I had been carrying. Looking back, I'm glad I made the decision, as one morning during one of my regular runs, I met my boyfriend, who is now my husband. Right from the start, Richard and I bonded over our shared love for staying active. What started as casual conversation during our runs turned into something much deeper. I liked running with him every day, and I felt much safer. Meeting him was one of the best things that happened to me, and it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't made the decision to start taking better care of myself. When Richard and I started going out and things began to get more serious between us, my parents were thrilled to see me so happy and genuinely liked him. They could tell that he was a good guy and that I was really falling for him. I will admit that before meeting Richard, I had only ever dated one guy, so I didn't have a lot of experience. However, my relationship with Richard felt really easy and natural. But of course, as always, Mindy found a way to put a damper on things. She would watch me come home all excited and happy after spending time with Richard, and instead of being supportive, she would say things like, "You shouldn't get so happy, he's probably just using you," or, "You don't have as much dating experience as I do, so don't get ahead of yourself. You are getting too serious and needy." It was as if she couldn't stand seeing me happy, especially with someone like Richard. I could tell she wanted me to feel insecure about my relationship, as if I couldn't possibly deserve someone like him. But the thing is, Richard was nothing like what she implied. From the very beginning, he was genuinely head over heels for me. He always kept his word, treated me with respect, and made it clear that he saw a future with me. I felt safe and loved with him, and I never once doubted his intentions, so I would pay no heed to Mindy's words. After months of dating, Richard came to my parents' house to officially meet the whole family. It was a big step, and I was a little nervous but mostly excited. My parents were very welcoming, as I expected, and they seemed to take an immediate liking to him. They saw how much he cared about me, and that was all they needed to give him their approval. It was a great evening overall, except for Mindy. I had expected her to maybe make a few snide remarks about me in front of him, like she usually did, but instead, she was strangely very flirty with Richard. She was making comments about how good he looked or laughing a little too much at his jokes. At one point, She even touched his arm during their conversation, which made Richard incredibly uncomfortable. He pushed his chair a bit away from her as well. I looked at my parents to see if they had noticed Mindy's behavior, but they seemed oblivious. To be honest, I'd always known that Mindy behaved a certain way around boys. She had this habit of batting her eyelashes, using a softer, more girly voice, and generally putting on an act to get their attention. It wasn't exactly surprising to me when she did it with guys in the past, but this time it was different. This was Richard, my boyfriend, and I didn't expect her to cross that line. I couldn't shake the uneasiness I felt about how she had acted that evening, so after Richard left, I decided to bring it up to my parents. I explained how Mindy had been behaving strangely around Richard throughout the evening, but to my surprise, they completely brushed it off. My mom even teased me, almost laughing at the situation, and said something like, "Oh, come on. It's cute that your little sister has a small, harmless crush on Richard. That probably just means she trusts him too." I was taken aback by their reaction, especially my mom's. It was like she didn't see anything wrong with Mindy's behavior. To her, it was nothing, but to me, it was way more than that. It was a violation of boundaries, and it made me uncomfortable watching my little sister try to flirt shamelessly with my boyfriend. Since my parents weren't going to address it, I decided to confront Mindy myself. However, when I brought it up to her about why she was touching my boyfriend's arms, she acted all innocent and naive, as if she hadn't realized what she was doing. She told me she didn't mean anything by it, that she just found Richard really cute. She told me that he looked too good for me. I shook my head and told her that her actions weren't just uncomfortable for me. They were creepy, and even Richard had noticed how weird she was around him. I told her that she had no right to behave like a creep around him. Hearing this, her face turned bright red, and I could tell my words had struck a nerve. Instead of apologizing or trying to explain herself further, she looked furious and stormed off into her room, slamming the door behind her. It was clear that I had embarrassed her, but I didn't regret confronting her. I wasn't just going to let her undermine my relationship with Richard or make me feel insecure. After this incident, I grew careful around my sister and stopped bringing Richard back home. He also confessed that he was not very comfortable around Mindy. Later, when it was time for us to go to college, he and I had been accepted into colleges that were almost an hour away from each other. It was a bit sad to be long distance, however. He assured me that we would make it work, and I believed in him. Mindy did remark to me before I left for my college that I should not have any expectations from Richard anymore and that men loved to cheat once they were in college. Luckily, despite her comments, Richard and I made our long-distance relationship work. We talked every day, made plans to see each other whenever we could, and stayed close even though we were miles apart. One day, Richard mentioned to me on one of our calls that Mindy had sent him a friend request on Facebook. He accepted the request without thinking much about it since she was my sister, so it wasn't completely out of the blue. But immediately afterward, Mindy started to message him. Richard told me about it right away because it felt off to him, especially considering the fact that Mindy hadn't really been in touch with me since I left for college. She had not even once called me or texted me. If my mom ever tried to make her talk to me, Mindy would start yelling at her that she didn't want to talk. Now, all of a sudden, she was texting my boyfriend? It didn't make sense. A few days after our conversation, Richard came to visit me at college like he usually did, and this is when he showed me all the messages she'd been sending him. I scrolled through them and saw that there wasn't a single reply from him, yet she kept texting him every day. She'd send messages like, "Good morning," "Handsome," or "Good night," "Thinking of you" with a heart emoji, even though there was no reply from him. On top of that, I noticed she had started commenting on some of his posts, sometimes calling him hot or dropping a rose emoji. It was getting way too much, and both Richard and I agreed that something needed to be done. So, with Richard by my side, I decided to call Mindy and confront her directly. Without beating around the bush, I asked her why she had been texting Richard behind my back. At first, she tried to brush it off, saying she just wanted to check in with him and see how he was doing. But that excuse didn't fly with me. I told her straight up that she had no right to be texting my boyfriend like that, and if she really wanted to check on him, she could have done it through me. There was no reason for her to go behind my back and act like this. I told her that she was acting like a creep by sending him multiple messages even though he had clearly been ignoring her. I made it clear that Richard was going to unfriend her from his account, and that if she ever bothered him again, I wouldn't hesitate to send all the messages and comments to our parents and cousins. I wanted her to understand just how out of line she was being, and if she wanted to keep acting like a weirdo by texting her older sister's boyfriend, then she could explain herself to the whole family. At that point, she started to defend her actions, giving me excuses that it wasn't a big deal, and Richard probably didn't mind receiving her messages, and that he must be lying to me by saying he was uncomfortable. I reminded her again this was her last warning. I didn't want to blow things up more than they already had been, so I told her that if she respected me at all, she'd stop immediately. Thankfully, Richard stood by me through it all, and after that conversation, he unfriended her immediately and seemed almost relieved to be done with her since this was very weird to him too. It felt like a necessary step in keeping her toxic behavior from creeping into our relationship. As you can probably imagine, after the whole ordeal with Richard, the already strained relationship between Mindy and me deteriorated even further. Although she never tried to reach out to Richard again after that confrontation, it became clear that she was harboring resentment toward me. Every time I came home during college breaks, she would refuse to acknowledge my presence. It was as if I didn't exist to her anymore, and any semblance of a sisterly relationship between us completely vanished. My parents noticed the shift, but they didn't really intervene. My mom, in her usual way of downplaying things, even after finding out about everything, would brush it off by telling me that fights between sisters are normal, and that Mindy would eventually grow up and past her harmless crush on Richard. She seemed convinced that this was just a phase and that eventually Mindy and I would reconcile. But we never did. Time passed and I graduated from college. Richard and I were still going strong, and after years of making the long-distance relationship work, we finally moved in together. Life felt like it was falling into place. We had our separate careers, but we supported each other through all the ups and downs. Then one day, Richard completely surprised me by proposing. It was one of the most emotional moments of my life. I couldn't believe that we had made it through so much together and now we were taking this next step. Our parents were over the moon, and we started planning the wedding with excitement. My mom, still holding on to the hope that we could mend our relationship, insisted that I include Mindy in the wedding. She talked me into asking her to be a bridesmaid, even though I had serious reservations about it. But when I asked Mindy to be a bridesmaid, she flat out refused. She didn't offer any explanation to me. On top of this, she refused to come to my wedding also. Our parents tried to intervene, but Mindy was adamant about her decision. To be honest, I was a bit relieved about her not attending the wedding, as I didn't have to worry anymore about any unnecessary drama. So I let it go. It had been 6 years, and I had no contact with Mindy. Life moved on, and she rarely even crossed my mind. That was until about 7 months ago, when my husband Richard casually mentioned one evening how he had just found out that his cousin Harry had posted a photo on social media with his new girlfriend. And to his shock, that girl was none other than my sister, Mindy. He showed me the picture, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The idea that Mindy would be dating someone from Richard's family caught me completely off guard. I hadn't even known they were in the same circles, let alone that they had met and were now dating. My immediate reaction was to wonder if this was some sort of intentional move on Mindy's part. After everything that had happened between us, and especially her strange fixation on Richard in the past, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this. Feeling like I needed some clarity, I decided to reach out to Harry directly. We'd always had a good relationship, so I felt comfortable enough to ask him what was going on. When I brought up Mindy, Harry told me they had apparently met at a gym months ago and had hit it off right away. He seemed genuinely smitten with her. I tried to keep the conversation light, but I had to ask the obvious question. Did he know that Mindy was my sister? He admitted that he did after a few dates, although Mindy had explicitly asked him not to mention her to me at all, which is why he never reached out to me or Richard. That was a huge red flag for me. Why would she deliberately want to keep her relationship with Harry a secret from me? At that point, I felt like I had no choice but to tell Harry the truth about my estranged relationship with Mindy. I laid it all out. The years of resentment, the way she had crossed boundaries with Richard, and why I had ultimately cut off all contact with her. I told him about the weird obsession she seemed to have had with Richard back then and how uncomfortable it had made both of us. I didn't hold back because I felt Harry deserved to know exactly why this situation was so bizarre for me. I was hoping he would at least understand my concerns or be willing to listen with an open mind. But instead, Harry got defensive. He seemed genuinely angry that I would bring all of this up. He argued that Mindy had been nothing but really nice to him and that I was probably making things up or exaggerating events from the past. He refused to believe my words, and I was left frustrated and hurt. Later, when my husband found out about my conversation with Harry, he was also upset. He furiously told me that I should not have interfered in their relationship since this was none of our business. I tried to explain that my intentions had been to protect Harry and ensure he was aware of Mindy's history and potential issues. I genuinely wanted him to be safe and to avoid getting hurt. But Richard firmly told me that I should learn to accept their true love since Harry seemed genuinely happy with her. He also told me that maybe Mindy had changed after all these years and we should give her some benefit of the doubt. Despite my reservations about Mindy, for the sake of Richard, I agreed to step back. In these past few months after the social media reveal, Harry and Mindy have been dating more openly. Our parents, though initially uncomfortable with the whole situation, have chosen to believe Harry's claim that it was all just a coincidence that he met Mindy like that in his gym. Richard and I, however, have kept our distance from them and rarely go to family gatherings anymore. This past weekend, Harry invited us to his housewarming party and insisted on us attending it. Apparently, he had decided to move in with Mindy. Richard and I were hesitant at first about attending, but we didn't want to cause a rift in the family by declining, so we reluctantly decided to go. When we arrived at the party, things felt off right away. Harry, clearly smitten, was practically bouncing around, telling everyone how he and Mindy were meant for each other. He seemed so giddy, so head over heels. But Mindy was nonchalant and almost indifferent to him. I did catch her staring at Richard once or twice, but she never once came over to talk to us. As the evening progressed, I could see that Mindy was drinking more and more compared to the rest of the guests. At one point, Richard excused himself to go to the washroom, and that's when Mindy found her chance to be alone with him. Apparently, she followed him there and tried to initiate a conversation. According to Richard, she seemed intent on talking to him privately, but he told her firmly that whatever she had to say, she could say in front of me. This is when Mindy, already quite drunk, started loudly confessing her feelings to Richard right there in the hallway, her voice slurring with alcohol. She told him that she had always been in love with him, that she had done everything in her power to be near him. Her voice grew louder and more frantic as she accused him of choosing me when, according to her, she was the better-looking one. Her loud outburst could be heard by some of the guests. I got up from my seat, but before I could even react, Harry rushed over to check on her. Unfortunately, he also heard Mindy's confession to Richard loud and clear. I could see the shock and hurt on his face as the truth dawned on him. The room felt heavy with tension, and I could see people whispering, unsure of how to react to the drama that was unfolding right in front of them. Richard, as always, handled it with grace. He simply told Mindy that it was inappropriate of her to say these things to him and that her feelings, whatever they were, didn't matter because he had always been in love with me. That only seemed to enrage her further, and she started to sob shamelessly. Harry then tried to escort Mindy away from everyone to stop her from embarrassing herself further. Eventually, Richard and I decided it was best to leave the party. The tension was too thick, and it was clear that nothing good would come from staying any longer. We later learned that after we left, Harry and Mindy had a massive fight right in front of everyone. It was reportedly a scene of utter chaos. Mindy, in a fit of rage in her drunken state, threw plates and glasses at Harry while he tried to dodge her attacks and kept demanding to know why she was in love with Richard. I am sure it must have been a horrifying experience for everyone present. Harry's parents soon reached out to me after the incident. They were upset and wanted to discuss what had happened. I reiterated everything I had previously told Harry. Mindy always had a strange obsession with my husband, even though Richard had never shown any interest in her, and probably had even befriended Harry with that intention. I told them that they needed to talk to Harry and make him see the truth. Today, I received a call again from Harry's parents. It turns out that Harry, after talking things out with his parents, tried to break up with Mindy, but as expected, she didn't take his decision kindly. In her anger, Mindy started trashing his apartment, threw things around, scratched Harry's car, and even tossed glitter all over the place as a form of revenge. She had then packed up and left, leaving behind a mess that Harry now had to deal with since only his name was on the lease. Harry's parents were understandably livid and demanded that I get in touch with my sister immediately since she wasn't picking up any of their calls. They also demanded that I make Mindy pay for all the damages. I reiterated that I would try, but that I doubted that she would even pick up my calls. Hearing this, his parents started threatening legal action, stating that if I didn't ensure she covered the costs, then they would sue me and her. I was taken aback by their reaction. I tried to explain to them that I had no control over Mindy's actions and that I had warned them and Harry already about her behavior. Harry's mom countered that I should have done a better job warning them, and because she is my sister, I should be held liable for the damages also. I asked if I was at fault for not warning Harry and his parents enough, or should I have done something more. Update 1. Wow! I can't believe my post has blown up so quickly. I spoke with Richard about this when he came back from work, and he assured me that he would talk to his family and sort everything out. He asked me not to worry about anything since I was not legally responsible for my sister's actions anyway. Also, Richard has apologized to me for not believing me when I tried to warn him earlier about the red flags regarding my sister dating his cousin. For those who keep asking, no, my husband has never had a relationship or affair with my sister. He has never even been alone with her. If anything had happened between them, my sister wouldn't have kept it a secret until now. She would have definitely made it known long ago. As for Mindy, I am not sure if she is really in love with my husband or not. Her obsession with my husband probably also stems from deep-seated insecurities and sibling rivalry over the years. I do think her inappropriate behavior towards him is more about competing with me and undermining my happiness. It's weird how my own sister has become my worst enemy. Update 2. So my parents have agreed to pay for all the damages caused by Mindy. It turns out that my sister went to them in tears after her breakup and has been living with them for the past few days. When I told my parents about everything Mindy had done to Harry's place, they immediately contacted Harry and his parents to apologize. They are furious at Mindy and have agreed to cover any necessary repairs. Mindy is quite fortunate that Harry isn't pressing charges against her. Harry's parents did call me to apologize for their earlier harshness. They admitted they weren't thinking clearly at the time and that they didn't really mean it. I have chosen to gracefully accept their apology as I understand how they must have felt after what my sister did. Update 3. Okay, so it's been a month since my last update. For everyone asking about what happened to Mindy and whether she faced any consequences for her actions. My dad has firmly decided that she has 1 month to find her own place and move out of their place. My sister has never had a stable job and has always lived with my parents or her past boyfriends for financial support. So this is going to be interesting. My mother has also stopped excusing Mindy's behavior and seems to be done with her. Both my parents seem really disappointed after having paid thousands of dollars to Harry for the damages she caused. Anyway, Richard and I are doing fine. I feel very much relieved knowing that my sister will no longer be a part of Richard's family. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My fiancé's best man is planning to joke about me being passed around in our friend group in his speech, and my fiancé secretly canceled his health insurance to pay for our wedding. My fiancé, his best man, groomsman, and I have known each other since we were kids. We collectively met between 6th and 7th grade and have been running around in the same friend group ever since. The group has grown and shrunk over the years, but a small core of us have remained extremely close. Recently, my fiancé's best man, Jay, 30M, has been making jokes when we're hanging out about the two of us dating that have now escalated. Admittedly, when I met Jay in 6th grade, I had the hugest crush on him and everyone knew. I was much taller than average for a girl at that age, and he was one of 2 guys in the entire school as tall as me. That, though, is where the story ends. I had one hell of an awkward phase in middle school, and he was very clear from the start that he was not into it. post-awkward phase, as friends and adults, it was something we constantly joked about but never seriously, since everything between us had always been platonic. This joke of me being rejected by him has now recently turned into how he dated me first whenever my fiancé and I are around, despite the inaccuracy and an increase of it being brought up. Everything has remained pretty lighthearted in context, and while annoying, is something I've been able to brush off or quickly rebuttal. This escalated this weekend when two of my fiancé's groomsmen were over, hanging out with my fiancé and me. The wedding was brought up, and after a concerning look between the two, they mentioned something had happened with Jay they thought we should know about. Apparently, Jay had been telling them stories he was considering for his best man speech, with the main one centering around how I had been shared around, and had made my way through the entire friend group. While they kept what was explicitly said fairly vague out of respect for me, they were clear it crossed the line, and insinuated I had slept with the entirety of the group attending the wedding. They were very clear with Jay that he could not say anything like this in his speech/toast. Jay responded with an "I know," stating that I had already made it clear my maid of honor would be proofreading all speeches prior to the wedding, so he wouldn't be able to get away with it anyway, but ended the conversation by saying something along the lines of, "But what if I could?" leaving the possibility open. Of all the groomsmen in the party, 6 including Jay, these two were the only ones in this core friend group and the only ones I had any sort of history with that could potentially be notable. It was all prior to high school and very innocent. One I went on my first movie date with, where our parents had to drop each of us off because we couldn't drive and picked us up afterwards. The other was the classic first 6-month relationship in middle school where it took 6 weeks to muster up enough courage to hug each other between classes in the hallway. Sure, we made out and very middle school level things happened, but this is something we've all laughed about now for over a decade. I wasn't the only girl in this larger friend group, and throughout the years, this was something that happened pretty frequently because we grew up in a smaller area. Overlap happened like this regularly in every group, and even more so as we went through high school. My fiancé is the only one I have seriously dated or had any sort of intimate relationship with of this friend group. We had an on-again, off-again relationship throughout high school that ended for a bit once I moved out of state for college, but we remained close friends and eventually reconnected when I moved back in 2019. We started dating in 2021 and got engaged in 2023. He's the only one in all of this I have ever slept with, who has seen me naked, and so on, making this situation even more odd and off-putting. Jay and I have been close friends since high school. When my fiancé was in a toxic relationship that isolated him from Jay after I had left for college, Jay would reach out to me for advice on school, girls, relationships, and more. He had always been our #1 supporter, advocating for my fiancé and I to reconcile our relationship throughout college and into adulthood. He even took a bit of credit and would throw around an "I told you so" here and there when we eventually did reconnect. I'm not sure how to handle this. I could write an additional post about how frustrated, confused, wronged, and uncomfortable I feel, all of which I plan to discuss in more detail with my fiancé after sitting on the issue for a bit longer. We've all talked about it, recognizing the way Jay is framing things as wrong, but my fiancé and the groomsmen are able to brush it off in a way I feel like I can't. I don't know how to move forward from this or what to do next. Additional information. 1. My fiancé and I aren't getting married until the end of next summer, so much of the conversations had about toasts and speeches have been more theoretical, except that a few have asked for the opportunity to give a toast, including the best man. We have loosely put this information and saved the dates on the website and other prints. 2. My fiancé and best man have been best friends since kindergarten. They were neighbors and inseparable until they each went their own way for college. My fiancé's parents basically raised him alongside my fiancé. 3. Jay has strictly only ever expressed platonic feelings for me. Even when both single or alone together, we have only ever acted as friends towards each other after the embarrassing early middle school crush I had. Update 1. April 3, 2024. First, I wanted to thank those who were clear and honest about how alarming the situation was from their perspective. When posting, I was still processing various feelings about the matter, and still am, which not only limited my ability to really look at the situation from a different perspective, but also left me in a state of paralysis of what to do next, both long and short term. Given the nature of this situation, There was a lot of historical context that was omitted to avoid making the original post too lengthy. I have done my best to include context that seems most relevant based on the original comments in my update below. Since posting, I have spoken in further detail to both my fiancé and one of the other groomsmen. I also confided in my maid of honor about the situation for an additional perspective outside of this specific friend group. After these conversations and reading through all comments on the original post, I've come to realize the significance of a few key details. Jay has a deep-rooted superiority complex. He always has, and it is something many in our friend group have become accustomed to. He has always been the type who seemed to believe he was the standout amongst his friends, whether that be through education, athletics, his career, or with women. Jay has also always been a bit egocentric, and a lack of accountability or consequences for his actions has been growing for some time now. Despite it almost always being unintentional, he more often than not is oblivious to the inconveniences and harm he causes others, as long as it is beneficial to his personal ego. This is about jealousy from a few different angles, but not about me specifically. When looking at the full picture, this escalation feels like a continued attempt to knock my fiancé down for reaching the next stage in life. Whether that is because my fiancé has reached it before him or has moved onward without him, I cannot say for sure. Jay has issues with misogyny that have also been escalating in tangent with everything else. His lack of respect for the women he has dated has also seemed to increase. Much of the personal tension him and I have had recently pertains to his perspective of women that have begun to veer into a more disrespectful realm, alluding to an increased belief that due to their gender alone, women are inferior. The good friend he was to me over the years, who was always kind and supportive, who never overstepped boundaries, was always there when needed, can exist in tangent with the above information. They are not mutually exclusive. Life happens and people grow, sometimes in opposite directions. I spoke in depth with one of the groomsmen to have further transparency of the situation and what was explicitly said. He acknowledged that the conversation initially centered around the excitement they had for the wedding, and Jay clearly stating he wanted to give my fiancé and I the best wedding and experience possible. The conversation evolved and Jay mentioned looking for icebreakers for his speech/toast and began bouncing a variety of distasteful jokes that focus more so on the expense of my fiancé than anything else. Then the idea was proposed about explicitly stating that my being passed around the friend group was how they all remained relatively close since middle school and high school. Jay was immediately shut down by the other groomsmen, told to know his audience, and also recognize he was openly alluding to things that were untrue and that could have an extremely negative impact on me personally. The conversation stopped shortly after this, and the groomsmen, without context of how this issue had been escalating, chalked it up to a one-off situation with Jay acting full of himself in the moment. My fiancé and I are the first of our cohort to get married and have a full-blown wedding with a ceremony and reception. These comments did not start escalating until after our engagement, roughly 1 year ago, following Jay's breakup with his long-term girlfriend. Jay has never made comments like this to me or my fiancé privately or when it is just the three of us together. Any scenario where this has been an issue has been in an environment which involved others, and mostly others that are not a part of this cohort from middle school. So what next? As mentioned in my original post, I spoke with my fiancé in detail about the situation and how I was feeling when all of this had been brought to our attention a few days prior. In an attempt to preserve myself in the moment, I brushed it off more so than I probably should have. I do not blame my fiancé for not having any immediate or strong reaction in the moment because I had avoided one myself. I think it's important to note that Jay is not a day-to-day character in our lives. While he travels frequently for work that brings him to our area, we live states apart. He has not lived in the same area as me or my fiancé since high school. Much of this evolution with his personality has happened in the last few years as well. I recognize this is not an excuse for the lack of accountability on our part, but felt it added important context that this was not something that was observed and ignored daily, but one that has slowly been recognized over time since we maybe see him 4 times a year at most. My fiancé was extremely open in conversation, immediately brought up having a conversation with Jay, but admitted to not viewing this as anything more than Jay just being Jay, and that he was all talk. At this point, we had only discussed how Jay had continually escalated the situation and how uncomfortable I had now become from this. The lack of accountability my fiancé had made for Jay's action definitely hurt, But then I recalled a commenter who had asked if I still considered Jay a friend because he actually was, or because that was how it has always been. To sum up what turned into a lengthier and much more productive conversation with my fiancé, I told him that while I recognized his friendship with Jay was something that had always been a part of his life, I did not personally want to be friends with him anymore. After this, I brought to my fiancé's attention that while the scenario was explicitly about me and attacking the integrity and character of a 12-year-old girl, every action or usage of the scenario was used against him to invalidate his accomplishments of getting married or make him come off as less than. I told my fiancé it was up to him on how he handles his conversation with Jay, but regardless, the disrespect Jay had shown me in this was a clear statement of what he thought of our own personal friendship. I firmly believe it is not my place to force how my fiancé handles his own personal relationship with Jay in this. All of this was deeply taken to heart, and you could tell that my fiancé had started coming to his own realizations as the conversation progressed. He recognized that if the roles were reversed or if it had been any one of my bridesmaids slandering me or him in any way, he would be firmly advocating for me to reevaluate my friendship with them. My fiancé asked for a few days to stomach the information himself and reflect on what he wants to say to Jay. He asked if it would be acceptable for him to bring up that I no longer wanted to be friends with Jay personally, and I said yes. I was clear that if Jay wanted to talk with me following their conversation as well, it would need to be the three of us and not a personal conversation. I am still evaluating how to approach the speeches/toasts at our wedding and am open to perspectives and ideas. For now, I reserve the right with my fiancé to omit Jay from giving a speech and having my fiancé choose another groomsman to do so in his place, potentially canceling the speeches/toasts altogether, and if Jay is allowed to give a toast, telling the DJ to cut the mic if need be. All of which he agreed with. There is still plenty of time for the situation to develop and for potential future updates, but I wanted to again thank those that emphasized the seriousness of this issue, gave their honest input and advice on how to handle the situation, and provided perspective on what they believe should be done next. When originally posting, I was still in a state of shock, trying to accept the situation as it had unfolded. Your responses constructively pushed me into the reality of what was happening and what I was feeling. Comments where OP has replied, comment. How are you/fiancé friends with this guy for that long and been okay with his behavior? Why is his best man so comfortable to even joke about something like that? Why does he need time to digest cutting him off? Why is he even still involved in the wedding? Me personally, I wouldn't allow anyone to disrespect my significant other, let alone someone I am supposed to be marrying. Best man or not. I think they are both walking red flags, Jay for being a misogynist and your fiancé for not cutting him out of the wedding in his life. These things can be taken as a joke, sure, but the level of disrespect is too great and your fiancé should stick up for you if he has any shroud of decency and respect for you as his fiancé and soon-to-be wife. OP's reply, happy to answer since I think it will be helpful for many. I also added a very small edit to the update to acknowledge a bit of this. Much of this behavior has developed over time and apart from all of us as a kid. He always had a superiority complex, but he was also very kind and respectful. It came off more as immaturity than anything else. Plus, at the time we were kids too. Following high school, Jay and I each moved a significant distance away from where we grew up. He still lives that far away. We get together maybe 4 times a year at most, and I genuinely believe he did not see me as more than some woman to use as collateral to knock his friend down when he made those comments. My fiancé has no brothers and Jay has always been a part of his life, filling that space. Jay also has no immediate family in his life and hasn't for quite some time, making my fiancé's role a bit more impactful. It is much more similar to him cutting off a brother than just another friend. My fiancé has also always been extremely kind and had a very peaceful soul. Don't get me wrong, while my fiancé prefers to avoid conflict, he has always been willing to stand up when necessary as well. I don't believe he realized how much had been at his expense as of late until after our conversation. Given their long history, I believe he's reflecting on a lot more than just this specific situation. The wedding is still over a year away and not until the end of next summer, and this all has happened in less than a week. Neither my fiancé or I have talked with Jay yet, so I did not feel it was right to post about any hard decisions regarding cutting him from the wedding and so on. Comment. These things can be taken as a joke, sure, But the level of disrespect is too great, and your fiancé should stick up for you if he has any shroud of decency and respect for you as his fiancé and soon-to-be wife. OP's reply: this was a huge part of the larger conversation we had and something my fiancé acknowledged as well. I think initially it was viewed under the lens of us collectively being childhood friends and my fiancé as the mediator, rather than the lens of me as his wife until our second, much larger conversation. Comment: it's only been a handful of days since this all came to light. I wish your fiancé's reaction had been more about coming to your defense than Jay's. But understand that sometimes people need time to truly process all that contributes to a messy situation, especially one with deep roots and close ties. OP's reply: thank you for conveying this so well. I did my best to add an emphasis to this, but could not do so as well in my own words and fear it got lost in the length of the post. Something for me to work on in future posts for sure. I very much have worries and, knowing my personality, will also be worried day of. I expressed this to my fiancé as well, and he completely understood. I recognize there is still plenty of concern to still address with my fiancé, but given how fresh the situation is, I wanted to afford myself a little grace of absorbing my feelings for what has happened before figuring out exactly what to do. I lost a friend too. Update 2. October 11th, 2024. I'm considering canceling our wedding and calling off our engagement over a pizza. Buckle up because this is a long one. While the drama around my fiancé's best man has simmered, the deeper issues surrounding a lack of support, if not, apologies in advance for this not being centered around my fiancé's best man. Not much has honestly changed. A conversation between them was had, much of which was my fiancé assuring him that things would blow over and accommodating Jay's stresses that it was only a joke. While my fiancé acknowledged what was said was wrong, the conversation wasn't to set boundaries. I eventually had to have my own conversation with Jay that my fiancé stood silently in the room for. I reached my breaking point 2 weeks ago following everything with his best man and a few other challenges we'd been facing. I tried putting my best foot forward these past 6 months. I sought out therapy to address the lack of support and anxiety I was feeling, and have made intentional efforts to work on our relationship to ensure we were in a stronger place before committing to each other. In May, after some unexpected and startling health concerns requiring a need for an emergency room visit, my fiancé came clean to me about secretly canceling his health insurance in January without talking to or telling me. When I asked him why, he blamed the cost of the wedding being too expensive and wanting to save the $150 a month, taking no other accountability for his actions outside of an apology. I have a small amount of experience in accounting and have budgeted the wedding down to the last dollar. This has included the consideration of inflation and other potentials as well. In total, from the smallest decoration to the cost of a marriage certificate, everything comes down to around $22,000, all of which I have strategically budgeted for throughout our 2-year engagement. My parents have graciously given us $14,000 as well to help with the expenses, and I have personally taken on the price of my dress, wedding bands, and a slightly larger portion of the vendors. To put it simply, while it may not be as much as others, we have privilege. Not only was there no need for this cancellation, but I have yet to see any of that additional support for expenses regardless. In response, I took it upon myself to take more of the costs on and pursue a part-time job on top of my full-time position that earns roughly $70,000 a year. While it's not by a large margin, I do make the most between us individually and have a larger responsibility in my daily work life with longer hours and a significant level of expected travel. As a result, the choice to take on a part-time role was not one of want, but of desire to ease the burden he was feeling. I started a role reviewing blogs, essays, resumes, and other forms of writing in July, and our relationship quickly unraveled. Because I commute, I typically arrive home 3 hours after my fiancé. After arriving, I would immediately have to hop on my laptop and review writings for the next 2 hours or so to stay on top of my quota. I tried my best to make a routine out of it so we would have intentional time together once I finished each night. This was met with cold shouldering, frustration, and a lack of consideration for my level of exhaustion and strain. For months, anytime I asked him to choose a show to watch or decide on dinner, while he usually does cook because I get home so much later, while I revised, I was met with scoffs and accusations that I no longer cared to tend to our relationship. I tried countless times to address his frustrations and was shut out or cornered in a circular argument about my priorities. 2 weeks ago, I was slated to travel for my full-time position to Atlanta during Hurricane Helen. In a matter of 12 hours, my afternoon flight for the next day was shifted to one leaving at 5 a.m. to give me ample time to shelter in place prior to the arrival of the storm. I rushed home to finish packing and prepare myself to drive over an hour to the airport and stay at a hotel nearby for additional flexibility in case of issues surrounding my early travel that next morning. After arriving home, I immediately hopped in the shower and asked my fiancé to order dinner so we could have one final meal together. During my shower, he offered to order a hot honey jalapeno and pineapple pizza from a new place we'd been wanting to try, which I normally would have been happy to try. However, I don't like jalapeno the way some people don't like cilantro, and am avidly against pineapple on pizza, something that's come up multiple times during our relationship. While I'm good with spice, the idea of taking that on with the travel stress and early start time I had the next day made me hesitant. I calmly asked if there was another option for tonight, and if we could try that specific pizza once I got home instead, expressing my concerns over my nerves, which received a frustrated scoff and sarcastic response of, "What then? Just cheese?" I explained any other topping combination would work and restated my issues. He walked out of the bathroom without response and I finished my shower. The pizza was never ordered. No food was ordered. I followed up as soon as I got out of the shower, asking if there was another option he wanted or place he wanted to consider, and received a prompt no. As I finished getting ready, I asked if anything had been ordered again, and no. I finally snapped and begged and demanded him to order the hot honey pizza because I was out of time. He accused me of making him feel like he's forcing me into the decision, but after a bit of back and forth, the pizza was ordered and the mood immediately shifted. Everything was peaceful, warm, and loving at home up until I left. Yet, I cried the entire hour and 15-minute drive to the airport hotel. I cried the entire next day throughout the storm in Atlanta, and the entire day after. Following a lack of sleep, stress, and intense emotions, I had a complete mental breakdown realizing I can't live like this. I called my fiancé and poured out every frustration, emotion, and feeling, which I admit was probably not presented in the best light, but none of it was well received. In the 2 weeks since, despite many attempts, conversations have gone nowhere, with only ultimatums being offered for me to make. I've proposed countless alternatives that focus on us working on ourselves and together these next few months, but he is only seeking an answer to whether or not we will be getting married next summer, and has made it known this is a decision that must be made by the end of October. At this point, I don't see how I can possibly gain the confidence to commit myself to him by next summer. For the sake of not doubling the length of this post, I will leave it at this for now. All of this is being discussed with my therapist at this time. He has chosen not to pursue counseling with me despite my asking and advocating. Many words have been expressed and I am trying, but I'm starting to second-guess and waver on just how far love can get me through all of this. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My mother wanted me to cancel my wedding to avoid hurting my sister, who was abandoned before hers. I refused and didn't invite them. I'm a 30-year-old woman, and I've been quite excited because I'm arranging my wedding with my boyfriend, who is now my fiancé. We've been preparing this big day for almost a year, and we wanted to make sure we had everything booked well ahead of time. Why? Because we chose a specific date in December for our wedding, and it falls right in the heart of the Christmas season when everything gets really hectic. Here's where things become tough. My mother isn't exactly delighted with my wedding preparations. Why? My sister was set to marry a few months ago, but her fiancé abandoned her right before the altar, which is kind of terrible. Yes, there was a massive mess, and she was really upset. My mother believes that holding a wedding so soon after the accident will be extremely difficult for my sister and may hurt her sentiments. First and foremost, my wedding isn't particularly fancy or extravagant. My fiancé and I prefer to keep things simple. We don't overspend on things we don't need. Our wedding is not too expensive. We're only inviting roughly 50 guests, including our closest friends and family. We are not throwing a big pre-wedding celebration or a wild bachelorette bash. It is simply just the wedding ceremony followed by a pleasant, modest meal. Another factor is that my fiancé and I planned our wedding long before my sister considered getting married again. We didn't make this decision on a whim. Everyone in the family, even my mother and sister, knew what we were going for in December. So we're not being insensitive or anything. But for some reason, just as things appeared to be going smoothly, my mother and sister decided to make a huge issue about it. It's very frustrating because it appears that they're turning this pleasant occasion into a drama. My sister is 3 years older than I am, and this would have been her second marriage. Her first relationship ended very calmly. They simply drifted apart after 2 years and chose to split. She has been single since then. So last Christmas, just when everything was bright and merry, my fiancé proposed to me, and it was beautiful. We had planned a summer wedding, but my fiancé was assigned a short-term trip overseas. So we had to postpone our preparations until December. Since then, we've been planning it in stages. I hate to admit it, but I believe my sister hastened into a second marriage because of me. When we announced our wedding last year, she had only recently begun dating him. They hadn't planned a wedding yet, but I found out a few weeks later that they were getting married. It sounded odd to me, marrying someone after only a few months of knowing them. Out of concern, I asked her whether she was sure about this guy because marriage is a major deal for me. She became defensive, claiming that not everyone is capable of developing a lasting relationship. It was a really snarky comment, but I let it go. She's never had a steady relationship. I believe the longest relationship she had lasted a year with the man she married first and then divorced after 2 years. I'm not saying that a year isn't enough time to get to know your partner, but after a broken marriage, one should proceed with caution. She had only known this guy for about 5 or 6 months, but she was ready for another wedding. Anyway, that was her decision, and I respected it and did not intervene further. They had planned an intimate church wedding with only a few guests. I believe it was less than 20. There were just 3 persons from the groom's side on the guest list. He said that his parents resided in a foreign nation and would be unable to attend on such short notice. So from his perspective, there were 2 buddies and 1 colleague. I believe it was his manager. Nevertheless, I am not certain. However, none of them, including the groom, attended the wedding. We remained waiting at the church. My sister and dad repeatedly called him, but he did not show up. Later, he texted her and said he couldn't marry her since he wasn't sure yet. My sister tried to calm him down and advised that they continue their relationship and then decide on marriage, but he ignored her. That dude was in his early 20s, less than 25. Again, I'm not generalizing, but you know how the early 20s are, especially for Generation Z. I don't think anyone wants to settle down at this age, especially after only a few months of dating. Since then, my sister has been bitter toward me. No, I did not do any of those "I told you so" things, but I believe she blames me for jeopardizing her plans. Being stood up at your wedding is the worst thing that can happen to anyone, and I consoled her afterwards. She requested to be left alone with her friends and mother. Except for her friends and her mother, I was the only other person in the room. It was amusing, though she might have just asked me to leave. I felt terrible about it, but I left without saying anything. I wasn't feeling well, but I recognized it must be humiliating for her, and she had no idea how to respond. I contacted her after a week to check on her, but she did not answer. I texted, but it was left unread, so I didn't bother again. A few months later, I met her at Mom's house. I asked her how she was doing, and she said, "Why are you treating me as if I'm destitute and abandoned by a man? I don't need a man. I'm happy and complete just being myself." I said, "Sure, I was just checking on you. You see, I'm not making up these assumptions." She wasn't giving me cold shoulders. After her wedding was put off last week, we sent out wedding invites. My sister called me. I assumed it was to congratulate me or something, but she was like, "So you're getting married in this outdoor venue?" I answered, "Yes." She said, "Cool," and then hung up. I was baffled until I received a call from my mother the following evening. She urged me to tone down the wedding since it was upsetting my sister. Toning down means canceling the venue and marrying at a church or at the registrar's office with 36 individuals on both sides. I informed her that we had been planning this for over a year and that she was well aware of the plan, so why would she suddenly have an issue with it? She said that it was because my sister had been stood up at the altar, and it would be inappropriate for me to have such a grandiose wedding within a few months. I told her that we had already paid for the majority of the wedding expenses, including the venue, food, and decorations. Not only had we paid the minimum booking amount, but nearly 60% of it. I tried to make her understand that modifying the plan would result in a tremendous loss. Canceling the venue would result in a significant financial loss for us all. Booking fees for the venue, decorations, and caterers are non-refundable. Hearing me moan about the loss, she urged that I cancel the wedding. I was at a loss for words. How could she ask me to cancel the wedding? She stated, "Actually, that is the better way to respect your sister's feelings. She would have enough time to recover from her ordeal." She suggested we move our wedding to next summer. I informed her that we had already postponed it for work reasons and could not do it again. She tried to gaslight me by claiming that if I could do it for my fiancé, I should do it again for my sister if I loved her. This made my blood boil. I assured her that I was not going to cancel anything and that the wedding would proceed as scheduled. She hung up on me. I discussed this with my fiancé, and he believes my sister is overly distraught by her position. It must be difficult for her to believe that everything is okay for me while her life is in shambles. He stated it was fine if I wanted a low-key wedding. Discussing this with my fiancé has made things worse for me because I now believe he is more sympathetic to my sister. It makes me feel like a jerk for not considering her feelings. Until recently, I had thought my mother's request to cancel or modify the wedding preparations was absurd, but now I'm questioning if I should do it. I do not know. Guys, have any of you been in a similar situation? I'd love to have a new take on this. Update 1. Hello everyone, and thank you for participating with me in the comments. It was quite helpful to me. One of the comments, probably many of you, suggested that my mother is narcissistic for asking me to adjust my wedding plans simply because it will harm my sister. I understand you are correct. It was quite cruel. I'm not doing anything to injure my sister. If she truly loved me, she would not feel this way. There's no other way to phrase it. She's wounded because she's jealous of me. That is it, and it is not my problem at all. Some of you inquired about my family dynamics, namely whether my mother has always been as apathetic to me and my sister has always been narcissistic. So the answer is no. Growing up, I never felt that my mother was biased toward my sister. Obviously, every parent has a favorite child unconsciously, but she never made it clear. Yeah, I used to grumble that mom liked my sister more, but she was never harsh or evil toward me. My sister and I had a fairly regular sibling bond in our early days. However, during our adolescence, we grew apart. It wasn't due to fighting or anything like that. We simply matured into completely different people. She was more homely and spent time with mom and our aunts making small chat. I was never interested in any of that. Instead of spending time with family members, I concentrated on my schoolwork, applying for scholarships, and socializing with friends. I also moved out really early. When I was 18, I enrolled at a college far from home, and I've been living alone ever since. Meanwhile, my sister lived with my parents until she turned 25. She only moved out once she married her first spouse. Even yet, her husband's house was only a few miles away, so she spent every other weekend at mom's place. Dad died 5 years ago, and since then, my sister has moved back in with mom. So yes, they have spent a lot more time together than I have. Naturally, their link is stronger than the one I have with my mother. Nothing much has happened since my last post. Actually, I'm avoiding any talks with them. I'm not going to visit or call them. My fiancé inquired whether I was contemplating my mother's plea to postpone the wedding. I said no, the wedding would go as planned. I'll provide an update if anything changes. Update 2. I hate to admit it, but my sister is a true narcissist, and mom has been supporting her evilness. So my mother invited my fiancé and myself out to supper. I didn't feel very well about it. Before that invitation, she contacted me to inquire about the wedding preparations. When I gave her updates, I got the impression she wasn't even interested. It was more like, "Are you still doing that?" Then she interrupted me and asked, "Why don't you come home? We can sit and discuss." I was perplexed by the entire sit and talk thing, but she explained that she only meant a general catch-up. I refused to go since I didn't like how she treated me. But last week, she called my fiancé to formally ask us to supper. He asked if she had a special event or anything she wanted to discuss, but she replied there was nothing special. She just wanted to serve us some home-cooked meals. He couldn't refuse, so we had to comply. Before traveling there, I informed my fiancé that if mom or my sister requested that we cancel the wedding or even make any changes, he should refuse. My fiancé is a soft-spoken gentleman who is easily taken away by the emotions of others. I advised him not to give in to their demands or make any promises. If such a circumstance came, he should remain silent, and I would handle it. We went there, and thankfully my sister wasn't present. Everything was going well until mom began discussing her wedding, how she and dad married at a registrar's office, followed by a simple lunch with both of their parents. She went on to explain how the money helped them set up their home and take care of other crucial matters. Then mom tried to manipulate my fiancé by suggesting that we have a long life ahead of us and shouldn't spend money on the wedding. I informed mom that we had previously planned a very low-cost wedding relative to our means. We both make decent money, but we live a very basic lifestyle. She went on to remark that it is our family tradition to have an intimate wedding because we are humble people who do not believe in bragging. I was like, wait a minute. My sister's first wedding was more than intimate. It had almost 100 attendees. Mom defended it, claiming it was the family's first wedding, and dad wanted it that way. That day, I discovered how wicked my mother was. She began sobbing, expressing her gratitude that dad was able to organize and see at least one of his daughter's weddings. She went on about how much she misses him at all family gatherings. My fiancé hugged mom to comfort her. I motioned for him not to be taken away by her weeping. He was a little annoyed by my stiffness. My mother almost convinced him and he said, "Sure, yeah, we'll take care of it. You don't care about things like that." My sister stepped in just then, and oh my God, her bitterness knows no bounds. She rushed to console mom, telling her that she would always be there for her and that unlike others, she would respect and follow her decisions. Her snark pushed my buttons so hard that I couldn't hold back. I informed her that I had done nothing wrong, but they were targeting me in such a way. This resulted in a full-blown quarrel between us. She stated I should have canceled my wedding because my sister was going through such a difficult time in life. She accused me of being insensitive because I did not even tone down the pomp and show. She was personally criticizing me, but I said nothing negative. I was simply defending myself, but when she remarked it was ridiculous to spend so much money on one event, I returned it to her. I answered, "Yes, it is just one event. However, it is the most important day of my life, and unlike others, I intend to have it once in my life." She quickly realized I was referring to her 2 weddings. I understand it was cruel and mean, but Guy, I was over her personal insults. For months, they've been calling me selfish and pretentious. I'm done being the good and bigger guy. I'm just finished. Now I enjoy being the devil. If they actually cared for my happiness, they would not be upset to see me marry. They're just jealous of me. Not to mention that my statement made the situation worse, and my fiancé had to intercede and drag me out of the house. While departing, I exclaimed that the wedding would go forward as scheduled, and if there was a problem, they could skip it. That happened yesterday, and I'm still seething as I write this update. I'll tell you, you can deal with all the injustices in the world, but narcissism from your own family is the most difficult to deal with. Update 3. Thank you everyone for your support. I apologize for the rambling in my last update. I was filled with rage and didn't know how to express it, but thank you to everyone who messaged me and commented. That actually calmed me down. Okay, I've got quite an update this time. I am getting married next week, and we are proceeding with our original intentions. That is the good part. A lot has transpired since my last post, but thankfully, I have not lost my resolve. After that severe, I'd call it, fight with my sister and to a lesser extent with my mother, I was experiencing a range of emotions, from rage to heartbreak. I didn't communicate with my fiancé for a few days since I wasn't in a state to have a sensible conversation. He intended to make me see something, But all I could think about was how my sister couldn't take seeing me happy, and Mom was siding with her, completely ignoring my sentiments. My fiancé talked me through it after my fury faded. He proposed that we change the setting to a church and cut down on our family. He believed that my sister was most concerned about the extended family attending the wedding and discussing her shame at the altar. I was compelled to reduce the number of relatives because I was not particularly close to my aunts and uncles, but I truly wanted the venue. Meanwhile, I contacted my cousin, who, to be honest, is more of a gossip monger. I called her to see if my sister had spoken anything about the fight, and indeed she did. My sister had spread rumors about me everywhere. She claimed that I humiliated and insulted her for her broken relationships. She absolutely exaggerated the entire story. Even if it was only my sister, I could understand, but my mother had also joined her side and had been disparaging me, calling me insensitive and arrogant. When I told my fiancé about this, he instantly got out of it. He was like, "Whatever you decide, I'm not getting into your family drama." So we're sticking with the original plan. A garden-themed wedding with 70 guests as decided. My sister's narcissism is reaching new heights. She was sobbing in front of my aunts, telling them how insensitive I am and how I am hurting her sentiments by marrying in front of her. Now I don't understand her problem. I'm not marrying her fiancé or husband. Why is she making such a fuss over it? I tried to console her. I urged her to feel happy for me. When this technique failed, she began encouraging everyone to boycott my wedding so that I may learn the importance of respecting the feelings of those close to me. When I found out about it, I emailed both of them and told them they were no longer invited to the wedding. I explained how they had been disparaging me and hurting my sentiments. I kept several important family members in the loop, including my godmother, aunt, and her husband, so that everyone knew my side of the tale. Following that email, I noticed the tables turning. I received multiple phone calls from various family members, including my godmother, assuring me that nothing was wrong. I have the right to have the wedding I want. Reservations were made months before, and everyone was aware of the arrangements well in advance. So what my mother and sister were doing was purely terrible. I have every right to exclude them from my wedding. My sister left me a lengthy voicemail calling me a spoiled brat and arrogant for not respecting her feelings. She stated it was quite tough for her to move on. She had been abandoned by her fiancé during her wedding only a few months prior. Instead of comforting her, I was busy planning my own wedding and clawing her wounds. Then she cursed me. She predicted that I would face a similar fate or worse. She claimed that my fiancé or future husband would leave me or cheat on me with other women. Only then, she explained, would I understand her anguish. All along, I had been supporting myself. I was firm about my decision, but hearing that crushed my heart. I couldn't believe my own sister could curse me that way only a week before my wedding. The week leading up to the wedding is already an emotional roller coaster for any woman, and hearing this from my own older sister is the worst thing. People bless their siblings and children at weddings, but I am being cursed. I'm not sure what I did to earn this hate. My mother also replied to my email. She claimed she was disowning me. She advised me not to see her again, since I didn't care about my family's feelings. This is how things stand so far. If anything more happens, I will provide an update on this topic. Otherwise, send me well wishes for the future. Update 4. Hello again everyone. I'm here with another update on my wedding story, and what a whirlwind these past few weeks have been. I genuinely appreciate all of your help and guidance. It's been a huge support during these tough times. Following my last update, things took an unexpected turn. With the wedding just days away, my fiancé and I were determined to go ahead with our plans despite the constant family upheaval. Life, as they say, is what happens while you're busy making other plans. 2 days ago, my mother called me. I was afraid to respond, fearing additional requests or comments, but something in her speech took me off guard. It was remorse, which I had not heard from her in a long time. She asked if we might meet for coffee, just the two of us. Against my better judgment, I consented, curious to hear what she had to say. We met in a quiet cafe, distant from the recollections of home. My mother, with tears in her eyes, handed me a letter. came from my sister. In the letter, my sister admitted to being overcome by her own grief. She stated that her actions toward me were unjustified and motivated by her anguish. She apologized for the upheaval she caused and emphasized her desire for my happiness, even if she was still unable to attend the wedding. Then my mother spoke. She apologized for her involvement in everything. She revealed that her grief over my sister's aborted wedding and the death of my father years before had impaired her judgment. She told me she loved me and regretted asking me to cancel my wedding. While she couldn't change the past, she wanted to make amends and begged to be a part of my big day. I was stunned. The earnestness in their statements was evident, and it gave me something to think about. I spent the night discussing everything with my fiancé, who was supportive of any decision I made. After careful consideration, I decided to extend an olive branch. I called my sister and mother and told them they may attend the wedding if they felt like it. My sister, still overcome with grief, stated she wasn't prepared to attend. However, she thanked me and wished me a wonderful day. My mother, on the other hand, was grateful and vowed to respect our plans and support us on our special day. Everything is set for the wedding. We're sticking to our original plan. A garden-themed wedding for our closest friends and family. Feels good to move forward. Not only will we celebrate our love, but we will also take steps to mend our family. Thank you again for your words of support and wisdom. I'll make sure to keep you updated after the wedding. Wishing us luck and bright skies. Update 5. Hello everyone. I'm back with what I think will be the most joyous update in this entire tale. Our wedding day has come and gone, and it was a celebration that not only represented the start of a new chapter with my husband, but also the mending of old scars in my family. Thank you all for your nice thoughts and useful advice along the process. Our wedding day began bright and clear. A wonderful December morning with a sharp cold in the air, promising a lovely winter wedding. The garden site was converted into a magnificent setting with white and gold decorations, shimmering fairy lights draped around the trees, and brilliant winter flowers that provided a pop of color against the tranquil white backdrop. The wedding was small and intimate, attended by roughly 70 of our closest friends and family. As I walked down the aisle, my fiancé's face was filled with genuine love and excitement, which I will cherish for the rest of my life. Our vows were genuine and emotional, reflecting our journey together and the future we envision. Throughout the exchange, there was hardly a dry eye. Even my usually reserved fiancé shed a few tears. Suddenly, midway through the reception, my mother took the microphone. My heart skipped a beat, expecting the reappearance of old frustrations. However, what followed was a genuine speech from her, in which she acknowledged previous mistakes and expressed her joy for us. She shared anecdotes from my childhood, which elicited gentle laughter from the audience. She ended by expressing how proud my father would have been to see this day. It was a significant healing experience for all of us. Later in the evening, the dance floor was open, and the atmosphere was charged with excitement. I danced with my mother, which I had not thought was possible a few months ago. We didn't say much and we didn't need to. The dance conveyed it all. My friends and family mingled, danced, and celebrated, forming new happy memories. Although my sister was not present, her presence was felt through the beautiful bouquet she sent along with a heartfelt message. I kept the flower near the family photos we exhibited to symbolize her role in the day. It was a heartbreaking reminder that healing takes time, and everyone's journey is unique. The reception offered a cozy, tasty winter-themed meal with comfort dishes that warmed everyone despite the cold weather. Our caterer did an excellent job presenting seasonal dishes, and the warm apple cider was a big success with the guests. As the evening came to a close, we launched lanterns into the sky, symbolizing the release of old grievances and the illumination of new aspirations and dreams. Watching them sail up into the starry sky accompanied by cheers from our loved ones was a magical way to close a wonderful day. Now, as we get back into our routine and think about our wedding, I'm filled with gratitude. This occasion was more than just the wedding of two people. It was about the reconciliation and healing of a family ripped apart by misunderstanding and pain. Moving forward, I wish to mend relationships and create a future filled with love and understanding. Thank you everyone again for your support and for keeping up with my posts. Your ideas and support have been a guiding light throughout difficult times, and I'm grateful for our group. As we travel on our honeymoon and future experiences, I carry not just my husband's affection but also fresh relationships with my family. Here's to new beginnings, full of hope and excitement. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My parents favored my younger brother over me. They even chose to attend his game instead of coming to my wedding. Buckle up, guys, this will be kind of long. So, I, 27, have a younger brother, Mike, 21. He is the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy, always complaining, always expecting others to bow to him, just awful overall. Ever since he was born, my parents fussed over him for everything. He's not special needs or had a traumatic birth or anything of the sort. He was just born, and my parents completely discarded me. My mom, 55, especially, she went from a loving mother to one of those boy moms that people make fun of on the internet. My father, 50, still showed me love and support, but he's always been too much of a coward to stand up to my mother and let me win at least once. The only one who stood for me was my grandpa, 76, who always called my parents out on their behavior and never liked my brother. I remind him of his late wife, my grandma, and we have a very special bond, but he lives on the other side of the country and I could never see him often. Mike knows our mom prefers him and loves to shove it in my face. Because of this and his behavior, we've always been at odds. He's spoiled, a brat, and an awful human. I can't remember how many times I ended up in trouble for things I did better than him or for things he framed me with. His only talent is his football skills. He won a scholarship to a nice college out of state. My parents didn't spend a dime on my education because apparently my fund had been used to cover expenses after a fire, just for me to discover years later that money was given to Mike to buy a car and a house. It's at a public university that I met Lucas. He was the first person I was really drawn to there. Of course, I met new people who are now my dearest friends, and thanks to them and Lucas, who was my best friend for years before we got together, I managed to move out of my parents' house. Now both Lucas and I are well known in our fields and have very good salaries. Now to the main issue. Lucas proposed to me a year ago. We're very private people, so we didn't post it on social media or anything, and when I told my parents, they dismissed it with a, "That's nice." I'm starting to think they downright didn't listen to me at all. We decided that we wanted a nice but simple ceremony and reception with our friends and relatives. Lucas convinced me to invite my parents and brother, but they never responded to the invite, and whenever I went to visit and began to talk about my wedding, without mentioning it was a wedding, my mom would always speak over me and about my brother's accomplishments and wild adventures. At one point, I got fed up with it and interrupted my mom to tell her that there was an event I was planning to organize whose date was unmovable. She told me that they couldn't attend because my brother was playing the last game of the season that very same day and wanted them to be there. Of course, this favoritism didn't surprise me. They missed my ballet shows and both my high school and university graduation for things about him. At this point, I wanted to be petty. I told both my parents that it wasn't a problem to miss this event, purposely omitted the fact that this event was my wedding, and didn't insist further. Flash forward to a few weeks ago. I got married. It was perfect. My family, Lucas's family, and our friends were all there and we had a blast. My grandpa was happy to give me away, and it was just perfect. My relatives asked me multiple times why my parents weren't there with us. I was honest and simply said they had my brother's game to attend and couldn't come. They gave me a few looks, and my grandpa was visibly angry for a while, but otherwise nothing strange happened. After the reception, Lucas and I left for our honeymoon and were phone-free for the whole duration of the trip. But once we got back, we discovered that a storm was welcoming us home. I turned my phone on and was unable to even unlock it before a storm of notifications popped up. Most of them were from my mother and brother. Mike called me all sorts of nasty names and insulted me because apparently one of my paternal aunts posted the photos of the wedding on Facebook and captioned it with a very obvious dig at my parents, especially my mom, for missing the wedding. The post apparently went viral in my parents' community, and they've been publicly shamed for their mistreatment of me. It also turns out that my grandpa personally visited my parents to go on a tirade to shame my father, his son, to the point of tears. This seemed to be my father's breaking point because he was so distraught for missing his only daughter's wedding and for his father's disapproval that he finally rebelled against my mom and is threatening divorce unless she makes it up to me. I think that's the reason why my mom has been spamming my phone with messages, at first insulting and threatening, and then downright pitiful, full of begging and pity parties. Now I'm at home with my husband, deciding how to approach the situation. Most of my relatives, even those I didn't invite to the wedding, reached out to apologize for what I went through and to claim they had no idea this was happening. I can't blame any of my relatives. They all live with my grandpa on the other side of the country or in another state. But my mom's sisters and friends are belittling me for not telling my mom about the wedding because now she's inconsolable at the thought of having missed my wedding. Personally, I think she just claims that to save face, but I'm not sure. The latest messages from my father and mother seem extremely saddened and hurt for missing my wedding. Now my family is divided on 3 fronts. The majority who are sticking by my side, my maternal aunts shaming me for hurting my mom's feelings, and my maternal grandparents who are adamant that I forgive my mom in light of her atonement. My best friends are telling me not to listen to them. TLDR. Since some of you guys want the juice without reading the post. My parents have preferred my younger brother over me my entire life and prioritized his events over mine. I got engaged and told everyone but was dismissed. I sent a wedding invitation to my parents and double-checked, but they didn't respond. When I told them the date, they told me my brother had a game they had to attend. I didn't repeat that it was my wedding during the exchange and told them that they weren't missing anything. I had my wedding, and now my parents are receiving backlash from my relatives and community after my aunt posted a dig at my mother. Edit. Thank you so much for the feedback and love. It's overwhelming. I'm going to address the popular questions here. I did inform my parents about my wedding. I sent traditional, on-paper invites to all my guests and was notified that all invites had reached their addresses. I did not receive any answer from my parents and Mike, a few very distant relatives, and some people on Lucas's side. I did reach out to all of them through a message to double-check, and those who hadn't replied told me they couldn't come. I asked my parents and brother via text, but they didn't respond. I was left to read, knowing them, and given all the things I had to plan, I didn't bother insisting. I didn't repeat the date of my wedding because I had already been told there was my brother's game, plus every time I insisted on highlighting my celebrations to get an answer, I was always told that it wasn't that important and to not be pissy and a bother because some things were simply more important than me. At this point, I think it's fair for me to not insist anymore. It's not worth the effort. I didn't keep my wedding a secret. I avoided telling my parents that it was my wedding to see if they would be interested in the slightest. But surprise, surprise, they weren't. Despite this, I did openly talk about my wedding with my aunts and uncles. My mother was in the room with us a few times when I discussed venues or dress shops with my aunt, the FB post one. But sometimes mom was on the phone and other times she was just chatting with other people. She never paid attention when I talked about it. During reunions, she smiled and said, "That's great, dear," and then would change the subject. Radio silence on Dad and Mike. I kept in contact with them because, well, all the times I tried to go and see in the past years, I've been harassed. I tried after my HS, bachelor's, and master's graduations, to which they never bothered to show up for reasons involving my brother every time. I was shamed for daring to turn my back on family by my parents, my brother, my maternal aunts, and my maternal grandparents. I think the turning point here is that all those times, Lucas wasn't by my side. We started dating a little after my last attempt at going and see, and now that I have him here, I feel more confident in my stance, but before that, I lacked this confidence. As I already stated, all my paternal side lives on the other side of the country and wasn't aware of how they treated me. I did try to expose my parents once at 14. My aunts, uncles, and grandpa reprimanded them. They faked being sorry, and then once home, I got the beating and gaslighting of my life for lying. After that, I kept in contact regularly with my paternal side but omitting my parents' abuse out of fear, which still haunts me to this day. Only grandpa knew, but he was always threatened to be alienated from me if he tried anything. My parents and I are not from the same city. I live in a city an hour's drive from my parents' small town, and they don't know my new address because once my brother tried to break into my apartment to steal some cash, and my mother backed him up, claiming that siblings share their goods. Now I moved, and I'll be sure not to tell them where I live. My parents didn't buy my brother a car and a house before he even started high school. They bought him a car for his 16th birthday and a house near his college when he began freshman year. They didn't spend the money from my fund right away. They just lied to me to use it later for my brother, keeping it stored for later in the meantime. Relevant comments. Comment. Do you think it would have been different if they knew it was a wedding and not just an event? OP. Well, I am pretty certain my parents would have been a handful at my wedding anyway. They ruined a cousin's wedding by making it all about how my brother had just given his first university exam, and he got drunk and trashed part of the cake, so I'm wondering what made me want to add them to the guest list in the first place. But then again, in my family, going NC or even LC is considered shameful. The cousin whose wedding Mike trashed cut my family off, and they've been dragged for turning their back on family over a minor accident. OP on her father missing her wedding and why it was a big deal for him. OP. Giving daughters away is a big deal on my father's side of the family. He only has me and has made a big deal since birth despite how he treated me. Appearances, that's what matters. Make of this whatever you wish to make it. Update 1. First of all, I want to thank all those who were interested in my story and those who wished me and my husband a happy life. I am beyond grateful for your reassuring messages and your love and feedback. The response was overwhelming and beyond what I ever thought it could be. I love you all so much. To those who believed my story was fake, I want to say that I'm happy your family life is better than mine to the point of thinking of my reality as a fantasy. But I'd appreciate it if you stopped harassing me in DM claiming that I'm writing a fake story for attention. If I've missed a few details in the OG post, it's because I was overwhelmed and crying my eyes out because of my family's harassment. You are not forced to read my story or think it's true, but I think keeping the smallest amount of decency would be nice. Oh, and before diving in the update, let me clarify a few things. Yes, the invitation specifically stated it was a wedding. No excuses. My maternal side of the family didn't come to the wedding. I'm sorry I didn't make that clear in the OG post. Most of them were busy, and the others just gave me excuses to send a gift but did not come. That's it. Don't ask me why they didn't discuss my wedding with my mom. It's not like I live in their brain. My mother's atonement is the fact that she apologized via text. Now on to the update. Things have been a little crazy this past week. I got off of Reddit for a couple of days to gather my thoughts. Then I had a lengthy conversation with Lucas about how to proceed. He's been my rock, and I don't think I could ever love him more than I already do. My parents were always a taboo topic, but he hit me with a brutal reality check that I absolutely needed. We reached the conclusion that the fact I kept in contact all this time, stuck around, and couldn't go and see isn't healthy. I've realized that the reason I never fully went and see was that deep down, I just wanted their approval, even now. Pathetic, I know, but it's like a drug. Being with my parents, they can be loving, funny, caring, and warm until they're not. The little love they give makes you crave for more, and you want their approval so badly you destroy yourself. But that's enough. I promised myself that things are going to change. I've thought about it and decided to start therapy and to go and see with all those who made an issue about this situation for good this time. After the days dedicated to reflecting on how I feel, I ended up messaging my father to tell him that if he wanted to talk, I would meet him, Mom, and Mike in a neutral location the following day. He immediately replied and agreed, and we met at the park. My father's sisters and brother accompanied us for damage control. My father looked distraught and as if he had been crying for a while. My mom looked the same, but I think it was more out of anger and embarrassment. My brother looked annoyed. I told the three of them about how their behavior and preference in regards of my brother always hurt me, and that their abusive behavior made me realize that I didn't want contact with any of them again. After that meeting, my mother tried to cut me off multiple times, but my aunt, the one who posted on FB, shut her up every single time. When I asked them why they would treat me this way, they didn't know what to say. My father kept crying and apologizing without giving me an answer, and my uncle reprimanded him for it. My mother seemed as if she was asking herself that for the first time, but well, in the end, she just said that she simply disliked me, plain and simple. And my brother, he just liked the attention and made me miserable as some kind of sport. I went on with my questions. When I asked why they never responded to my invite, they claimed to have never received one. I showed them the text, but they denied receiving them. And well, it turns out that they hadn't, in fact, received my wedding invitation. When it arrived at their house, they weren't there. The only one in the house was my brother, who had come visiting for the weekend. He saw the invite and, as many of you guessed, ripped it up and trashed it. And then, when I texted my parents, he deleted the messages. It wasn't hard to do. According to him, they kept my chat archived and didn't get the notification. So my parents never actually got a formal invitation. I was just distraught. I asked Mike why he would do that, and he just shrugged and claimed that it wasn't as important as the stuff they had in the program. And anyway, I had to stop Lucas from punching him in the face. Strangely enough, my parents were upset and started reprimanding him. He actually began to throw a tantrum and cry crocodile tears, and I must admit that I was kind of satisfied. But then my mom claimed that all was resolved. There was no need to fuss over a misunderstanding, and it was time for me to clear their name. That set me off, and I interrupted her, telling her that they weren't forgiven at all, that just because Mike trashed the invite, it didn't mean it automatically canceled all their neglect out. Plus all that time, it was still very obvious that I was having a wedding, and they should have asked about it. You want to know my mother's response? She said something along the lines of, "I did hear you talking about a wedding of yours, but I just thought you were being delusional and seeking my attention with exaggerated scenarios." She was convinced Lucas didn't actually like me nor would ever marry me. When I tell you I was about to trash her face, do you believe me? Another thing came up. It turns out that my brother didn't have a football game to go to at all. My parents used the fact that my husband, friends, and I know little to nothing about football, we prefer soccer, and the fact I stopped asking about it when Mike would mock me during his time in high school to make up a story to avoid my event. At the time I wrote the OG post, I couldn't confirm or deny the presence of a game because my brother has private social media, and Lucas and I are blocked, and I foolishly trusted my parents' word. But no, you want to know where they went with that man-child? They went to Disneyland because Mike wanted to go. They used the football story to cover for my brother's 100th tantrum holiday, and apparently, they did it multiple times in the past months. At that point, I was just completely burned out and overwhelmed by this amount of information. The fact that I had been fooled this badly, that I was so gullible, genuinely made my blood boil, and I snapped. I stood up and told my father he was a sad, weak man, unable to stand up for his kids unless his wife approved of it. I told my brother he was a poor excuse of a man that will not accomplish anything in his life and that he'll always live like a leech, a baby to the point of uselessness. And to my mom, I told her that she was the worst narcissist, pathetic little woman on the earth, that she didn't even deserve to be addressed and judged for her irrelevance, that not even God could help her out because she is just too rotten. Harsh, I know. My mother shot up from her seat to scream at me halfway through my rant to her, but I was just too mad. I shouted at her to shut the hell up and sit down and listen for once. She got so mad. It felt like steam was coming out of her ears. I don't remember much after that, just that I kept talking and talking. It felt as if all my anger and hurt just flooded out. At one point, I'm pretty sure the whole park was silent. I spat at my parents and Mike that I was disowning them all and that if they're smart, they'll think before reaching out again. I took my purse and left with Lucas, Anna, and Francis, leaving my parents and brother at my aunt's and uncle's mercy. I think at some point, the reality of what I had just learned and said finally hit me because I ended up having a panic attack on the way home. Lucas was driving, so Anna helped me through it until we stopped in a parking lot to calm me down. I am beyond grateful for their help. Once home, I just fell on the bed and went to sleep. I really wanted to go with you guys' advice and post the whole thread on FB, but given my work and career, I couldn't expose myself like that. One thing is sharing my story from an anonymous throwaway on Reddit. The other is on FB with my name and face plastered everywhere. I couldn't go down that path. Instead, I did something better. I made a folder with all of my mother's insults, messages, and awful comments and sent it to the woman in charge of my mom's church. It's a tight-knit community my mom worked her ass off to enter in, but that is also extremely judgmental, and being shunned by them is a death sentence. And well, that's exactly what happened. Just like clockwork, the scandal spread like wildfire, going out of the church and reaching the rest of the small town. You can imagine what this means for my mother and father. Because of my little spill, I did find other messages from my maternal side of the family belittling me even more for upsetting their sister or daughter and insulting her. I just didn't care anymore at that point, so I followed you guys' advice and told them that from now on, they will no longer be part of my life and that they can talk all they want. I just won't care. Instead, they should be grateful I don't send their nasty texts to their employers and spouses. I blocked every single one of them, grandparents included, on everything. I did find a lengthy message from my father. He apologized for not being strong enough to face my mother, agreed that what I said was true, and couldn't believe that he had lost so much of my life because of her. He told me he is going to divorce her no matter what my decision will be because he is tired of being controlled. He would like a relationship with me to make up for all the years that passed. I did reply to him to tell him that as of now, I really don't want to see him or forgive him. He has replied that he'll try his best to win me back and that he loves me. I replied back that as of now, I find that hard to believe and then blocked him too. Frankly, his slimy way of trying to get out of this situation by throwing my mother under the bus is pathetic. At least she was hateful and owned up to it. He is only able to blame others for his choices. I don't want to surround myself with people like that. My mother and brother are blocked similarly to my maternal side. Mike wrote other messages to taunt and insult me, and I just blocked him. My mom threw herself a pity party for being shunned by her community and for her marriage going into shambles, and I just replied, "Good riddance," before blocking her too. As for my grandpa, he has decided to stay with us for a while to stick by my side. He really is the best and has read some of your comments. He isn't going to admit that he's flattered by them. Since then, a few days have passed, and all has been quiet. Lucas is spoiling me rotten, and I'm starting therapy soon. I know this isn't the drama-filled, revengeful update you hoped for, but well, this is it. I'll let you know if anything changes or evolves. Thank you so much for the love and support you showed me. I think I'm gonna log out now. As for now, goodbye. I've decided to start therapy. I confronted my parents and brother about their behavior and ended up disowning them. I sent my mother's nasty messages to the leader of her church, and now she and her husband are shunned by their community. Relevant comments. Commenter. Maybe once your father is actually divorced and gone and see with her and your brother, there's a basis for some rekindling of your relationship, but wow. OP. Perhaps, but as of now, I don't want to think about it. He's been a supportive dad, but he's never once defended me in his life. His love was unconditional until my mother decided it was, in fact, conditional, and sometimes it really felt like his love was just something on and off. I don't want to stick around to see when the magic spell will wear off. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My mother blamed and resented me for my father's near-fatal accident. Even upon my father's death, I remained a thorn in her side. I've always known my life wasn't going to be the kind you see in feel-good movies. Adopted into a family where the age gap could easily fit another generation between us, I was the anomaly at family gatherings, the young face among wrinkled smiles, the boy in a world of history I could barely relate to. My dad, born in 1927, was a World War II veteran, a man whose silence told stories his words never could. My mom, a decade his junior, carried a gentleness eroded by time and a deafness on her left side that made her world as lopsided as her hearing. I was 34 now, reflecting on a slice of my life from about 12 to 15 years ago that had shifted the course of my relationship with them, especially with my mom. That period became a chasm that widened with time, filled with silence and misunderstandings. The incident that set everything off was as mundane as it was tragic. It happened one night when the comfort of sleep was abruptly replaced by a startling thump from my dad's room. In the haze of half-sleep, I reasoned it away as one of our animals knocking something over, or perhaps my dad, in his nightly bathroom ritual, had accidentally dropped his cane. I rolled over, choosing the warmth of my bed over investigating. That decision would haunt me for years. Morning light brought the harsh reality crashing down. My nephew's scream pierced the usual quiet, a sound so filled with terror that it catapulted me from my bed. Rushing into my dad's room, the scene before me was one-eyed replay over countless times. My dad lying beside his bed, a blanket wrapped tightly around his neck, his skin turning a worrying shade of blue. Adrenaline kicked in. I managed to lift him back onto the bed, unwrapping the blanket from around his neck. His breath was shallow and labored. The call to the ambulance was a blur, as was their arrival and the subsequent rush to the hospital. The layout of our house, something so ordinary, became a detail of contention, a piece of the puzzle in the blame that was cast my way. My room was adjacent to my father's, a fact that somehow was supposed to arm me with the ability to foresee and prevent the accident. Half asleep, my mind did not leap to disaster. It didn't occur to me that my father could fall out of bed despite his health issues. After his third stroke, my adoptive parents made the difficult decision to sleep in separate bedrooms. His mobility was impaired, and she needed her rest to be able to care for him during the day. This arrangement, while practical, created an unintended isolation for my father. His room was upstairs, while my mother's was directly below. That night, as fate would have it, my adoptive mother was turned onto her good ear, her deaf side exposed to the ceiling and thus to any sounds that might have come from my father's room above. She didn't hear the fall, just as I didn't. Her deafness on her left side was not something new. We had all adapted to it in various ways over the years. Yet, in the aftermath, it felt like a cruel irony that neither of us heard the one sound that mattered most. The guilt of that night weighed heavily on me. The what-ifs haunted my thoughts. What if I had been fully awake? It was as if my proximity to my father's room that night endowed me with a responsibility I was unaware I had. A guard duty I failed. Following the incident, my dad's health spiraled, leading to his admission to an old folks' home for veterans. The air in our home thickened with tension, as if every word and gesture were filtered through a lens of blame. My mother, her grief manifesting as anger, directed her fury towards me, the convenient target for her swirling storm of emotions. It didn't matter that the fall was an accident, a tragic twist of fate that I, in my half-asleep state, could not have foreseen or prevented. In her eyes, I was the culprit, the reason her husband, my adoptive father, now lay in a bed at the old folks' home for veterans, his robust spirit dimmed. The initial conflict was a crack in the dam of our family dynamics, releasing a flood of long-suppressed frustrations and resentments. My mother's blame became the soundtrack of my life at home, a constant reminder of that night. Conversations were minefields. Each word I said weighed and found wanting, each silence loaded with accusation. The more she blamed, the more I withdrew, retreating into a shell of indifference to protect myself from the pain of her words. The moment I decided to join the army felt like the first step towards something new, a path that was entirely mine. But that dream quickly became entangled in the web of my family's expectations and my mother's fear of being left alone. My mother, wielding her grief like a weapon, saw my departure not as a young man's quest for his own path, but as abandonment. After filling out the necessary forms, ready to embark on this new journey, my mother took matters into her own hands in a way that left me stunned and betrayed. She spoke to the army recruiter, a conversation I was not privy to, but the consequences of which I felt deeply. My mother told them I had changed my mind about joining, that I couldn't go through with it. Her words, authoritative and final, painted a picture of doubt and indecision that was entirely hers, not mine. It was a deliberate act, one rooted in her desperation to keep me close, to ensure I remained at home to take care of my father. The realization that my mother would go to such lengths to keep me anchored to home, to a role she deemed suitable, was both heartbreaking and infuriating. The betrayal of that act, her going behind my back to alter the course of my future, strained our relationship even further. It was a clear sign that my desires, my aspirations, were secondary to her need to keep the family unit intact, regardless of the cost to my own dreams and autonomy. Faced with the collapse of my plans and the unbearable atmosphere at home, I made a decision that would set the course of my life for the next few years. College, a backup plan I had never intended to use, became my lifeline. The acceptance letter from a university 200 miles away was my ticket out of the stifling environment of blame and resentment. I packed my life into a few boxes, not knowing when or if I would return, driven by a desperate need for space and a fresh start. Life away from home was a stark contrast to what I had known. College presented a world of opportunities and challenges, but the freedom it afforded came with its own set of difficulties. The shadow of my family's turmoil followed me, a cloud that darkened even the brightest days. To support myself and avoid the need to return home, I took on 2 jobs, juggling academics and work in a relentless cycle that left little room for rest or reflection. Balancing work and school wasn't easy, but it became my new normal. The campus library was a sanctuary of sorts, a place where I could lose myself among the stacks of books and the quiet hum of students studying. Here, I wasn't the son blamed for his father's accident. I was just another student trying to make ends meet and build a future. The job required meticulous attention to detail, sorting, shelving, and ensuring that the library remained a place of order and learning. It was a quiet, steady job that contrasted starkly with the chaos of my personal life. The local cafe, on the other hand, was a bustling hub of activity. Here, I was a barista, a friendly face behind the counter, crafting lattes and cappuccinos for a stream of customers. The pace was relentless, the environment lively, and sometimes overwhelming. Yet, there was joy in the rush, in the smiles of satisfied customers, and in the camaraderie with my coworkers. This job taught me resilience, the ability to keep smiling even when I was tired, and to find peace in the rhythm of the work. These jobs, while exhausting, provided me with a sense of purpose. They were my escape from the turmoil back home, a way to prove to myself that I could stand on my own 2 feet. The satisfaction of earning my own way, of being responsible for my successes and failures, was empowering. Amidst the long hours and the tired evenings, I found moments of happiness and pride. Being busy, immersing myself in work and school, helped me to momentarily forget the bitterness of the past, allowing me to focus on building a new future for myself. Yet, the question of my departure, of whether my actions had been justified or selfish, remained unanswered. A puzzle I was still working to solve. The emotional toll of separation and blame was heavier than I anticipated. The physical distance from my family did little to ease the burden of guilt and unresolved anger. I missed my father, the man who had, in his quiet way, been a source of strength and stability. My mother's accusations echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the rift that had grown between us. I found myself questioning my decisions, wondering if I had indeed been the jerk for choosing to leave, for putting distance between myself and the family drama. After graduation, I landed a stable job, the kind that felt both like a triumph and a compromise. It was a steady climb away from the tumultuous past, into a semblance of adult life marked by paychecks and small freedoms. The rare trips back home were exercises in tension, the air thick with unspoken recriminations and the heavy presence of my mother's enduring blame. It wasn't that I didn't want to see my father. It was the opposite. My heart ached for the man who seemed to shrink a little more with each passing day, his vitality sapped by illness and the domestic strife that buzzed around him like an unrelenting swarm. Driven by a mix of guilt and love, I set a new goal for myself, to earn enough money to afford the best possible treatment for my father. It became an obsession, this idea that financial success could somehow translate into a redemption of sorts, a way to make amends for my perceived failings. My career became more than just a job. It was a means to an end, each promotion, each raise a step closer to providing my father with the care he deserved. The irony of working tirelessly to support someone who, through no fault of their own, felt like a stranger, wasn't lost on me. Despite my attempts to heal and move forward, the news of my father's passing knocked me back to square one. That night, I received a call at an hour so late it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. It was my aunt on the other end, her voice steady but laced with unmistakable sorrow. "It's about your dad," she said, and in that instant, I felt the ground beneath me shift. My father had passed away after a prolonged illness, an event we all saw looming on the horizon yet hoped would somehow steer clear of our shores. I was hundreds of miles away, wrapped in the cocoon of my new life, far from the home that felt more like a battleground than a sanctuary in recent years. The pain of the news was a sharp jab to the gut, a mix of grief and guilt swirling in a tempest I couldn't contain. My relationship with my family, particularly with my mom, had been strained at best, severed at worst. Yet, the finality of my father's departure cut through those tangled feelings, reminding me that beneath the resentment and misunderstandings, there was love, raw, unfiltered love for the man who, though not of my blood, had been a pillar in my life. I didn't have time to pack. There was no moment to sit and ponder what to bring. The urgency of the situation propelled me forward, my actions driven by a singular need to get back as quickly as possible. The bus was the first mode of transportation I could find, a decision made not out of convenience but desperation. I boarded at dawn, the early morning light casting long shadows that mirrored the heaviness in my heart. The journey was a blur, each mile stretching on as I grappled with the reality of my father's death and the inevitable confrontation with my family. I rehearsed conversations in my head, anticipated accusations, and prepared defenses, all the while battling the growing knot of sorrow for the loss of a man who had shaped so much of who I had become. Arriving at the funeral home, the gravity of the situation finally settled in. I saw him there, lying in repose, a tranquility on his face that had eluded him in his final years. My father looked at peace, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within me. The sight of him, so still and serene, broke through the walls I'd built around my heart. The grievances that once seemed insurmountable now appeared petty in the face of such profound loss. My eyes traced the lines of his face, each wrinkle a testament to the life he had lived, the battles he had fought, and the love he had given, however imperfectly. Standing before him, I was acutely aware of the finality of death, how it leaves no room for apologies, for mending fences, for saying all the things left unsaid. The weight of my unresolved feelings towards my family, my mother's harsh words, and the guilt of my perceived negligence crushed me. In that moment, I wished for nothing more than to turn back time, to relive those last days with the knowledge of their fleeting nature, to offer words of love instead of silence. My father's passing was a great loss, a void that would never be filled. Yet, it also served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of forgiveness, understanding, and compassion. As I stood there amidst the somber faces of those who had known and loved him, I realized that holding on to anger and resentment served no purpose but to prolong the pain. In that moment, all I felt was the piercing ache of missing a man who had been more than just a father figure. He had been a guide, a confidant, and in his own way, a source of unwavering support. Standing at the end of the somber line, I extended my hand, offering a quiet thank you to each person who had come to pay their respects to my father. The room was filled with a heavy silence, punctuated only by soft murmurs and the occasional shuffle of feet. It was a moment of closure, a final goodbye to a man who had been a constant in my life despite our complexities and the distance that had grown between us. But that silence shattered when my mother's voice, sharp and laden with grief and accusation, pierced the air. "His death is partly due to him," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger in my direction. "He's a cruel person for ignoring his father, a selfish person for going to college and not taking care of his family." Her words, like daggers, cut through the solemn atmosphere, turning heads and drawing a collective breath from the gathered mourners. The accusation was a blow not because it was new, but because of its public nature and the timing. It was a reopening of wounds that had never fully healed, a reminder of the years of blame and misunderstanding that had driven a wedge between us. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. It was her initial accusations that had pushed me away, that had made me feel like an outsider in my own home. And now, as we stood together in grief, she chose to resurrect those accusations, to paint me as a villain in the eyes of those who had come to mourn my father. I felt my heart break all over again, not just for the loss of my father, but for the loss of what our family could have been. The sadness was overwhelming, a tide of emotion that threatened to pull me under. I had come to say goodbye, to find some semblance of peace in the wake of my father's passing. But instead, I was met with public condemnation from the one person whose acceptance I had longed for. The eyes of the guests were on me, some filled with sympathy, others with judgment. In that moment, I realized the futility of trying to defend myself, of trying to explain my side of the story to those who had only heard one version. The damage was done. My mother's words had painted me as the culprit, the son who had abandoned his family in their time of need. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew the weight of the guilt I had carried, the countless times I had replayed that night in my head, wondering if things could have been different, if I had acted sooner. I also knew the pain of being pushed away, of being blamed for something beyond my control. It was a pain that had driven me to seek distance, to build a life away from the constant reminders of my supposed failures. As I stood there amidst the whispered conversations and sideways glances, I realized that my mother's words, though hurtful, could not define me. They were a reflection of her grief, her inability to cope with the loss of her husband and the strained relationship with her son. It was a sadness that I shared, but I also knew that carrying the burden of her blame would not bring my father back, nor would it heal the rift between us. There I was, sitting on the porch of the funeral home, my tears falling silently. The weight of my mother's public accusation at the funeral had left me shattered, alone with my grief and the sting of her words. It felt as though the ground beneath me had opened up, swallowing the last remnants of what family meant to me. My aunt found me there, her presence a gentle reminder that I wasn't completely forsaken. "What's the matter?" she asked, her voice soft, a stark contrast to the harshness I had just endured inside. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The dam broke, and I told her everything. How my mother blamed me for my father's death, how she labeled me cruel and selfish in front of everyone. The words poured out, raw and unfiltered, the pain and confusion I had been carrying for so long finally finding an outlet. My aunt listened quietly, her expression one of sadness and understanding. When I finished, she sighed, a sound that carried so much sorrow for her sister's actions and empathy for my situation. "Your mom is grieving and lashing out," she finally said. "But that doesn't excuse her words or how she's treated you." And I then shared with her the story of the night my dad had fallen out of bed, the sound that had roused me from sleep, the horrifying discovery in the morning, and my frantic efforts to help. It was a confession of sorts, an attempt to explain my side, to make her see that I wasn't the villain my mother portrayed me to be. To my surprise, my aunt took my hand, squeezing it gently. "You are my new adopted son now," she declared, her words not just a statement but a promise, a pledge of support and acceptance that I hadn't realized I was so desperate for. "And your mother? She doesn't deserve you. Not if she can't see the truth and pain in your heart." Her words were a balm to my soul, offering a sliver of solace in the midst of my turmoil. Here was family, not bound by blood or obligation, but chosen, offering me a place when I felt I had nowhere left to turn. As we sat there, the cool evening air wrapping around us, I realized this was the beginning of a new chapter. My aunt's acceptance and understanding gave me something to hold on to, a glimmer of hope in a time darkened by loss and misunderstanding. It was a reminder that family isn't always about who raises you, but who stands by you when the ground gives way beneath your feet. In that moment, I understood that while my relationship with my mother might never be repaired, I wasn't as alone as I thought. Life would go on, and with my aunt's support, I might just find a way to navigate this new reality. Despite the pain and heartbreak, her words offered a path forward, a chance to rebuild from the ruin left by my father's passing and my mother's blame. Now on to the next story. Story 9. Discovered my wife of 11 years has been cheating on me with my best man for months now. Her dad has cut her off completely, and she's lost our house, car, and everything. My wife, 35 female, and I, 38 male, were married for 11 years. Her father and I worked together for even longer than that, which is how my wife and I met. I went to his house for a work party, and his daughter was there like a prize to be won. When I started talking to her, we hit it off before I knew she was my boss's daughter. I stayed late into the night talking with her until I knew I had to ask her on a date before leaving that night. She accepted. We dated properly without consummating our relationship until we were both clearly serious about each other. Neither of us were talking to other people, neither of us had those toxic social media accounts, and our families knew we belonged together. It was a beautiful relationship, and I felt like I was living life to the fullest with my loyal, honorable woman. Our wedding was a huge, wonderful event, and I wasn't nervous at all. I knew how serious she was about me, and I really felt like we were meant to last forever. Fast forward 10 years. Her father was forced to sell his business. He made a considerable amount of money from the sale, and since I was laid off, he gave me a large sum of money. It was enough for my wife and I to live off of for years, so I took my time looking for another job. I actually contemplated retirement or starting my own business from home. After spending all my days at home, I could tell my wife started to get distant and anxious. She wanted to know when I planned on getting out of the house. I asked if there was something she wanted us to do, and she said no. It didn't seem like she wanted to go on a trip with me or get out of the house together. It just seemed like she wanted me to leave for a while. I didn't really get it because we loved each other's company, and the house was big enough that for some of the day we didn't see each other. We each had some alone time, but I also made sure I paid her adequate attention and spoke her love language. One day, I was reading in the living room when I got a naughty image of my wife airdropped to me from her phone. It made my heart race, but not in a good way. Every bit of this felt wrong, like this picture wasn't intended for me. When she entered the room, I just looked at her and showed her the picture on my phone, waiting to gauge her response. She just smiled and played it off like it was intended to be a pleasant surprise for me. I suggested that next time she comes stand in front of me and starts stripping. She just smirked and left the room. I made it my personal mission to check her phone at the next opportunity. So while she was cooking and had her back turned, I grabbed it. I found the same picture I saw, except this one was sent to none other than my former best man, the closest friend I had in this world, the man I asked to be in our wedding. I took screenshots of their flirty conversation, which included comments about how I wouldn't leave the house and they were both desperate to hook up again. My whole world came crumbling down. Within an hour, I threw her phone at a head-level cabinet beside her, smashing it to bits. She screamed, so I rage-screamed. Her eyes were as big as an owl, and she was as still as one too. I told her she cheated on me, and she was speechless. She didn't want to admit it, but she knew she couldn't deny it either. With her standing there, I sent the screenshots to her father and said I wondered how she was going to get through life without me or her daddy to save her. Her face started to crumble until she was a sobbing heap on the floor. I turned off the stove and told her to start packing her stuff because I was filing for divorce. She turned so white, her skin looked slightly green. She begged me for forgiveness with all the strength she had left. She grabbed my pant, and I pulled away. I told her I didn't deserve this heartbreak and disrespect, and that I wouldn't find it in my next wife, no matter how long she committed to me. Marriage is supposed to be beautiful and blissful, not what she turned ours into. She wailed breathless sobs as I pulled her out onto the porch, surrounded by piles of her belongings. She asked me who was coming to get her, and I said I didn't know. That was up to her to figure out. My former best man was married, so it was just 2 hours later that his wife discovered the truth. He was kicked out, and so my wife actually tried to ask him to come get her from my porch, and he cussed her out before blocking her. It was so dramatic and heartbreaking to experience this. I felt like my life became a horrible reality show that I did not relate to. I suddenly despised the woman I loved for so long. She tried calling her father. As soon as he answered, she sounded like a whiny little girl when she called him daddy, and tried to paint me as the monster to blame. He scolded her so loudly that I could hear it from the doorway. She tried to interject, but he wouldn't have it. He told her she did not behave like the lady he and her mother raised her to be, and he couldn't fathom how she had the gall and heartlessness to cheat on me, who he called an honorable, respectable man that didn't deserve this devastation and betrayal. He ended the phone call after telling her he would not be coming to save her from facing the consequences of her actions. It was a friend that my wife barely considered a friend that came to her rescue and said she could stay in her spare bedroom. My wife had always bragged to this woman about how lucky she was to have me and the house we lived in. Her dad was the one paying for her car, so she only kept that until he told her to take over the payments. She couldn't afford them, so he took the car back. My ex had it all until her actions reduced her to nothing. I can only wish her luck recovering from such a stupid and unnecessary decision that changed our lives forever. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.